Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure and privilege to be introducing you to this event, Education Without Borders, being organized by Sushant University. I'm Shashi Menon. I'm Dean of School of Design at Sushant University. And today we have a lineup of great speakers who will be speaking about the subject. And the core idea of this conference is to explore what globalization, what internationalization, and what education without borders means for India, and how we can bridge this gap and how we can take it ahead. With this, I welcome you all again to this event, and I would like to hand it over uh, to Anushka Chaudhary, the host for today's session, the first session, which is on thinking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. A very good morning to all of you. I am Anushka Chaudhary, faculty at the Sushant University and moderator for this session. We're fortunate to have Dr. Pramod Sinha as our keynote speaker for today. Dr. Sinha is a pioneering force in Indian higher education. He's the founder and chairman of Harappa Education, founding dean and member of the executive board of ISB Hyderabad, founder and trustee of the acclaimed Ashoka University. Dr. Sinha has been instrumental in setting up a wide spectrum of change-based higher education initiatives, including a management program for career-oriented women and entrepreneurship fellowship for the Himalayan region. He has also been a media and entrepreneur, education consultant, and management advisor at the 9.9 Group, CEO of Anand Bazar Patrika Group, and a partner at McKinsey and Company. Let us welcome Dr. Sinha, whose first love are academics. Welcome, Dr. Sinha.
Thank you, Anushka. Thank you very much, and good morning to all the listeners, and thank you for tuning in on a Saturday morning. I want to congratulate Sushant University on this very important conference, and I'm very excited to see that you have an excellent lineup of topics and speakers for the day, so I'm sure everybody's going to enjoy it a lot. And it's my real privilege that I was invited to kick off this conference. It's a huge responsibility as well, but I'd like to thank Professor Nina Zucchi for inviting me and considering me worthy enough to kick this off. The topic I was asked to speak on is the role of India in global higher education. And I'm no expert on the topic, but what I thought I would do is try and share some points of view and see if some of these may resonate with you as we go through my presentation. In the past, India has played a very shaping role in global higher education, and we know that from the great history of institutions that existed in India in the old days. In the present day, the truth is that we are seen to be much more of a seeker of knowledge and education rather than a disseminator or a spreader of higher education globally. I believe that we are at a very important inflection point in the world. And I believe that this can change, that it is in our power to once again become the disseminators of knowledge and education to the world, and that we can really retain our status as shapers of global higher education. Now, of course, this will not happen automatically. I think all of us who are involved in higher education have to start looking forward, and I'll come back to that as we go through this talk. But for a minute, let's think a bit about the past. If we can go to the next slide. We are all very familiar with the stories of our ancient universities of Takshila, Vikramshila, and Nalanda. But I'd just like to remind everyone of a few points about these universities that at least I find very inspirational. And while they may have been in the past, I think if we have to make a mark in the future, then there's a lot of good lessons that we can draw from these universities. From my limited knowledge, Takshila was the first of its kind institution of higher education in this part of the world, which is similar to today's universities and today's higher education. And it probably dates back to about a little over 2000 years ago, maybe longer actually. And the interesting thing about Takshila was that it was at the intersection of these three very prominent trade routes, which were contemporary to those times. The Persian Royal Road that came all the way from Greece and Italy. And in fact, it is recorded that Alexander the Great, in fact, came all the way to Takshila. The Silk Road, of course, which came from East Asia and China. And then there was the sort of North Indian Royal Road, as it's referred to, which was, of course, the channel through the Indian continent or subcontinent as we know it today. All these three routes actually converged at Takshila. The interesting thing is that all of the accounts of Takshila that we have arise from the accounts of foreign students and teachers who came to Takshila. And so one of the things that is very notable is that our universities from a very early time were already global. They were attracting students from all over the world. The same is true for Nalanda, which in fact happened a little later and continued all the way till the 8th or 9th century. And I apologize to all the accurate historians in the audience for the dates. I may not have got the dates right, but I think I'm broadly right. And again, what Nalanda built its foundations around the Buddhist teachings and the Buddhist worlds. And a lot of what we know about Nalanda came from the monks who came from China and through what is today's Afghanistan and the northwest frontier, and came to study in Nalanda all the way in Bihar. As kids, I got a chance to go and visit the ruins in my very formative stages of growing up in Patna, where I'm from. And at that time, I didn't know that I would be talking about Nalanda so fondly so many years later, or that I would get involved in higher education. But looking back, it's truly quite an inspirational site to go to, the planning and the way the universities of those days were built. Two other significant things about universities from those times. One, of course, that they were global, but the other that unlike a lot of the early universities in Greece, which we know about, from the times of Plato and Aristotle, Plato's Academy or Aristotle's Lyceum were perhaps the origins of universities in the Western world. And what you find is that in those countries, in those geographies, higher education was much more about giving an opportunity to intellectuals and the wealthy folks who lived in close proximity to these schools. You don't hear of Chinese going all the way there or Indians going all the way there to study. On the other hand, in our case, we welcomed participants not just from all over the world, but also people of all socio-economic classes with very little regard for language or literacy or their wealth. And in that sense, the education provided by these universities was truly democratic. Today, we talk a lot about the democratization of education and access to education. It was truly open to all. And the last thing that I have not too much evidence, but at least in my mind, I like to believe, is that these universities were highly multidisciplinary. There is no doubt that they were teaching multidisciplinary courses. What I don't have evidence of is were people studying multiple disciplines at a time, but my belief is that they probably were. But it's staggering, the list of courses or programs that were in today's world, the degrees or the departments or the schools that these universities had, our Indian universities of Takshila, Vikramshila, and Nalanda, was actually quite staggering. So you could study medicine and law and astronomy and religion and so on within the same university. So they were very highly multidisciplinary. And I would imagine that students also took a lot of multidisciplinary courses and learning. It's interesting that 2000 years later in our new education policy, we are talking about multidisciplinarity, which is where our university started. The little point I wanted to make was not to make just sort of go rah-rah and jingoistic about our past, but to really help us as educators to appreciate that a lot of what we are talking about today about India playing a role in global higher education are lessons that we have already learned and have in our DNA. And it's a matter of taking that forward. Now, let's see what's happening today. And if we go to the next slide, we all today lament the fact that we are sending students around the world and there isn't enough quality in our own country. But at some level, while I do worry about the fact that we are spending so much money sending our students abroad, right now, I think in the United States, Indian students have the largest population after Chinese students, and there are about 2 lakh students, about 200,000 students overall in the US at this point in time. And every year, there are about 3 lakh students that are going out of India across the world, from New Zealand to Australia to Southeast Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, now to China, across Russia, and people are going to study dentistry in Ukraine and Slovakia and Serbia, and so those countries, all the way, of course, then across Europe, US, and Canada. And so a large number of our students are going abroad. But since the topic is about our contribution to global higher education, let's not forget the fact that we are actually contributing in a big way by outsourcing our education to the rest of the world. Just the contribution to the US economy in 2009-2020 was expected to be roughly $7.6 billion. And if I can do this math right, then that would be about 50,000 crores is what this would be, I think, if I'm doing my math right. And so it's a large amount of money that we are spending. And with that kind of money, of course, if we were to reinvest in our own country, we could have tremendous impact. But the fact is that in the United States, a lot of universities, the education system is really being supported by our fees. And to that extent, we are contributing today. And I don't mean this as a joke, but it is true that we are contributing to global higher education by enabling these educational institutions to access our student and provide them with a quality education. If we go to the next slide, I think we have also contributed through our talent pool that is now in several universities across the world. And of course, we know of the faculty who are at these universities doing amazing research and providing lots of teaching and research expertise. But if we go to the next slide, please, Prabhakar. We are seeing a lot of Indians now rising to senior level positions in the top echelons of universities around the world. So if you look east at the Nanyang Technological University, NTU in Singapore, Professor Subra Suresh, who was at MIT and then he was at CMU and the National Science Foundation, he is the president. and is running the the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. If you go west, one of the deans of Imperial College London was Professor Anandalingam, who headed that institution. And of course, if you go to the United States, we have quite a few folks who are actually running and leading educational institutions and schools within educational institutions. Some of the prominent ones that I know, and some of you may know, is that Professor Renu Khator is a woman. I think she's a chemist or scientist by training, and runs the University of Houston system. We have Professor Pradeep Khosla, who was originally at Carnegie Mellon University. He's the chancellor of the University of California at San Diego. We have Indians who are heads of the university at Buffalo, which is the old SUNY State University of New York at Buffalo, the University of Vermont, a very large University of Massachusetts at Amherst. These are all universities that are actually headed by Indians who went after their undergraduate education in India, studied in the United States, and then joined as faculty members there. At Harvard University, some of you will know that at Harvard Business School, Professor Nitin Noria was just the dean for several terms and has now been succeeded by Professor Srikant Dattar, who's also from India. And these are all products of the Indian education system who are running, what is arguably the top B school in the world. Professor Vijay Kumar, who was my senior at IIT Kanpur, runs the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences at the University of Pennsylvania and just got renewed for a second term. So there's a large contribution that we are making to global higher education through our graduates and through our students. And I don't think we think of it that way. We almost think of it as a loss to our country or as a possible bad thing because these students we are losing. But on the other hand, I see it as a big asset, and several of these folks are now contributing back to India. As you know, Professor Anant Agarwal leads edX, and Professor Sanjay Sarma is a renowned, similarly edtech professor, but also leads edtech at MIT. So there are several people who are contributing to the advancement of global higher education who are from the Indian system and who would acknowledge that their contributions were shaped by the Indian education system. Of course, not to forget that we have several Nobel Prize winners who are still living and out there, who are from India. Of course, prominent amongst them, Professor Amartya Sen and, of course, Professor Venkat Ramakrishnan in Cambridge. Moving on, I don't know if Prabhakar, you are being able to hear me, but I completed this slide. We can go to the next slide, please. Let's look at the future. And let me talk about three big trends that I see that are in fact creating the opportunity for us from India to contribute to global higher education. The reason I make this point is that the kind of disruption that is taking place in global higher education and in India, and the discontinuity and the huge opportunity and challenge that we have in India can serve as a laboratory, a sandbox. We can truly reinvent higher education going forward because we have the opportunity to. In most other countries, higher education is so deeply embedded, and the possibility to start new institutions and start from a clean slate is just not there because you have so much infrastructure and existing colleges and universities that you would there have to think about changing and transforming and reforming and completely redoing higher education, which is very difficult to do. But in our case, we have the opportunity to truly create things from scratch. Sushant is a great example of that. Ashoka, ISB, the institutions I've been associated with, are great examples of the fact that where else in the world will you have opportunities to start things afresh? And when you get a chance to start things afresh, you can start things anew, and you can start things with a view to what the future needs and build backwards rather than trying to rebuild things from the past. And that's the big case I want to make. Now, there are three big things that suggest to me that we have this opportunity. Number one, there's massive scale, and the demand for education in this country, even though we are today seeing great demand and great numbers, you haven't seen anything yet. The numbers are just going to grow in a way that has not been ever witnessed in the history of the human race. Never before in human history do we have to educate so many young people so quickly. So today we are talking about 17.5 million high school graduates coming out every year. And today, roughly about 3 to 4 million only of these are going for higher education. Now, there's a massive gap. As some of you know, the official figures are that the GER in this country is somewhere between slightly higher than 25%. And the government is now saying that we'll take it to 50% in the next 15 years. Well, that basically means doubling the 40 million population of students that we have in higher education today. And if you account for some growth in the population, then you're looking at something like over 90 million students in higher education at any point in time. Now, the truth of the matter is that there is no way that the old model of building buildings, classrooms, campus, bringing students and faculty to teach small classes of however many, whether it is 30 or 100 students at a time, that old model will never meet the demand. It is like saying that in the age of the jet airplane, we are trying to ferry people across with horse carts. You just won't be able to get so many people educated if we follow the old model. The old model doesn't work in educating so many people so quickly. So we have to almost reinvent that model, just as that model was reinvented when books came around. You see, the whole university system that really took off around the world, where we have so many universities and so many students studying in brick and mortar universities around the world, really got enabled, of course, by the blackboard and so on, but really through the book. And it was the printed book, it was the invention of the printing press that indirectly contributed to that. And there was a massive explosion. I think the same kind of disruption is going to take place with technology, and I'm coming to that in a minute, which is our only chance to actually educate all of these people. The democratization of quality is what is happening through technology. Now, I know that several of you might be skeptical about technology, and you may say, how can technology provide the same quality that an in-class experience can? Of course, it cannot. But what about if you can't get an in-class experience? There are lots of students in our country who will never get to see a class. And most of the students in this country who are seeing the class are actually getting very poor quality education. So for a lot of our students and young people, and for generations to come, online education is going to be the only way they will be able to access education. But there, they are not going to settle for second class or third quality education. Everybody is going to want the best quality teachers and the best quality courses, and that's something that is possible. Finally, the world of work is changing, and honestly, the demands of the workplace, the demands of professions, the demands of jobs are going to be such that you are constantly going to have to upgrade and upskill yourself. So learning is going to become a lifelong thing, not a 3-year thing, 4-year thing, 2-year masters. We are all going to have to learn throughout our lives. And this notion that you're going to be in college and then formal learning will stop and everything else will happen at work is already gone out of the window and will soon happen across all professions and so on. So if you take these 3 big trends, this is a massive disruption, but a massive opportunity as well. And I think that we really have the chance to innovate and come up with new models, because these models are being built from scratch. Let me give you some examples. If we can go to the next page. You are all familiar with these examples. So if I take the examples on the bottom right, the Byju's, Vedantu, and Unacademies of the world. I don't want to dwell on these because these largely are focused on the K-12 space, though they are gradually moving into the higher education space as well. They are already there in the testing space. They are now starting to provide courses to improve employability of our students. But again, the kind of reach and the kind of impact they are having on learning is quite staggering. If you leave their valuations and their sort of the hoopla about their financials aside, the truth is that a lot of people are just turning to these places to learn. And if you leave these commercial ventures aside, I know that a lot of my friends still today go to Khan Academy if they want to teach their children at home some new concept in physics or maths or statistics. But let me also give you very quickly one example that I want to mention to you is that I don't know how many of you know, but at Unacademy, the whole model was started in this notion that if I want to teach something, I can go create an online course and access students through their platform. Now think about how this actually completely changes. All of us don't have to be part of a university to offer people courses. We can teach as and when we want, if we want. Not just us, but anybody can. And that it's hard for us to conceive a world like that, but it's possible and it is happening today. Let me give you some examples of things that I'm personally involved in. Let me give you the example of Ashoka X. At Ashoka University last summer, prompted by the pandemic, and I know that I'm at 10:30, which was my allocated time, but I will take only about 5 more minutes if that's okay. At Ashoka University, prompted by the pandemic, what we did was we decided to offer some courses by Ashoka academics, but also academics from around the world who we knew. And we invited them to this online platform to offer a course on a topic of their choosing and something that they felt passionately about. Now, mind you, these are not Ashoka faculty. The students who came, we removed restrictions on their admission. I mean, we did filter them a bit because we had about 40 students per class. We offered 13 such courses of faculty many who had never ever taught in India. We got about 40 students enrolled in class, and they were paying 20,000 rupees for a 20-hour course, 20 contact hour live delivered course. But mind you, there were students who were from class 9 and there were students who were 70 years old who were actually taking these courses, not Ashoka students or Ashoka alumni alone, though they were not barred from taking these courses. Now imagine suddenly a brick and mortar university has broken down the walls literally, and now both our faculty and our students are people who normally would not come to Ashoka but are now getting taught Ashoka, and they're paying for it. So we taught in aggregate about 600 odd students across 13 courses last summer, and it was an amazing success. And now we are doing these courses every month going forward under the Ashoka X brand. Let me give you the example of what I'm doing at Harappa. So at Harappa, my belief is that technical skills are good, but people typically call soft skills, though they are very hard skills to learn, and they are the employability skills. These are the skills that make us successful at work. Nobody teaches us anymore. So we've created a bunch of courses around how you think, how you problem solve, how you communicate, how you collaborate, and how do you become more self-aware and a better leader of yourself. And these courses we are curating and creating online. For me, Harappa is like an online university, which only focuses on not liberal arts, not management, not architecture or planning, but on what I call thrive skills. Suddenly, I've been able to create a whole institution with a whole new curriculum and a whole new approach to education, which doesn't have a brick and mortar equivalent. So that's another example of what kind of disruption is possible. What I was doing at Ashoka X, a lot of other universities are doing. But what we are doing at Harappa is actually quite unique. And that's the point I'm trying to make, that you have the option to create something that is unique in the world and contribute to global higher education. The last example I'll use is Samshiksha, which I'm building for the government. And those of you who want to check it out can check out our app at samshiksha.gov.in. What we have done is we have collected on this app all the free online courses of high quality. So we have curated it. It's a catalog of courses that are mapped to the normal curriculum that people study in a college. And as a student, if you are a second year economics student and you want to have to do a course on macroeconomics, Samshiksha will recommend to you what are the best quality macroeconomics courses available to you online for free content that you can access. Now, this is a very powerful idea. It's like a library, except I have chosen for you and made it easier for you rather than you going around, wandering around websites and portals to figure out what courses to do. But what is staggering, and I'll end with this, which is on the next page. If I can go to the next slide, please. Using this method, I can put together the entire 4-year, 8-semester computer science curriculum if a learner wants to learn on their own online. And look where these courses are from. These courses are from IIT Kharagpur, Duke University, New York University, IISc, IIT Bombay, Georgia Tech, Princeton University, MIT, University of California, San Diego, Barcelona, Princeton, I mentioned. We have multiple courses from IIT Kharagpur, UCSD, Columbia University, University of Edinburgh, University of Texas, University of Minnesota, Stanford University, MIT, Harvard, and so on. Now, if you are a computer science faculty member, I've got this vetted. They feel that, if you take these 8 semesters of 32 courses, this is equivalent to the content of a full stack computer science degree. And today, the list price, the list MRP of these courses together over the entire 8 semesters, full credits, full contact hours taught by eminent faculty from top universities, is only 2 lakhs of rupees. For 8 semesters, with these quality of courses, the entire 4-year degree curriculum of computer science is available today online. This is possible for 2 lakh of rupees if you wanted to pay for the certification from the various universities. If you were to actually negotiate and put this together, that cost can be brought down. That is the possible disruption that an initiative like a Samshiksha can make in what we are trying to do in India. I just want to end here by saying that given the place we are in India, where there's an unprecedented opportunity, where we have a living laboratory of large number of students looking for high quality education, where we know that existing brick and mortar models will not work, where we are being forced to innovate to give our younger generation a chance to a high quality education. There's a massive opportunity for all of us to innovate, and I'd urge all of us to think about this as a new opportunity rather than look back and try to solve the problems of the existing system. We have to do that, but we also have the opportunity to build something completely new and completely exciting. and try to be what the Takshilas and Nalandas were to the world one day. Thank you again very much for inviting me, and I'm sorry that I took about 6 minutes longer than I was allotted. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pramath. I'm so grateful that you were able to lay the stage and sort of articulate on all the issues that are going to be raised for the rest of the day. Coincidentally, today happens to be the World Environment Day, and at Education Without Borders, we are taking the position that as responsible higher education professionals, we need to focus on holistic education, and which Indian thought is replete with. So taking what Pramath has said forward and looking at how we can locate ourselves in that ecosystem, I'm now handing over to Anushka. And thank you so much, Pramath, for being here and taking time out of your busy schedule. Thank you, Anushka. You can now continue with the rest of the day. Thanks. You're mute. Anushka, you're muted.
Our next guest for today is Dr. Joy Sen. Dr. Sen is a professor of the Department of Architecture and Regional Planning at IIT Kharagpur. His areas of research are community and regional planning analysis and programming, architecture and planning related to heritage studies and documentation. He is currently associated with the two mega projects sponsored by MHRD, Government of India, the Sandhi Science and Heritage Mega Initiative, and also PI2 in the Future of Cities. Over to you, Dr. Sen.
Uh, Hello, good morning. Hello, Anushka.
Hello.
Thanks for giving me the platform. I hope I'm audible
Yes, sir.
and the presentation is visible.
It is. Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think it was really a delight to listen to Professor Pramath Sinha. I mean, he has really set up the stage. I was really excited by the very, key and exciting word that he had used, the inflection point. In fact, the whole history and the continuum of global education, and with a massive role of India's education system, is in the offing of an inflection point. There is a past, there is a present, and there is a very strong future. So within a short span of time, I like to give you a snapshot of a sequence of concepts, which connects all that Professor Sinha has said before me and all the other things that will come after me by the eminent speakers in the whole chain of today's event. So what I'll do a little recovery of Indian knowledge systems, the concepts of the ancient wisdom. I mean, how Indian system was holistic, and how we call for a revival and a continuity into the future. I mean, why there is an inflection point. If there is an inflection point, how do we go ahead with internalization of our borders of education, and also get students to India from different parts of the world seeking knowledge which they are not getting in the West or in other parts, and why they should do so. I mean, what is the reason that there should be a recovery? And if there is a recovery, what are the constituent parts of the recovery? And why should be the people of the global arena be interested in Indian education system? And of course, a revival of national confidence, which is number one. So with this, I'll go to the three parts of my presentation. I'll go very quickly. The first part is about concepts. The second part has a few examples. And the third part has some reasons why there's a recovery. So I'm going to be a little structured about recovering the past. Indian education system is actually a very powerful one. For that, we have to go back to our roots, and that's the two epistems or the divisions of Indian knowledge systems. One is very impersonal and universal, and other is very, application oriented. I mean, located and embedded in the continuum of space and time. Normally we call that srutis, something that is oracular, which is handed down from one age to the next age, independent of any personality or any sectarian institutions of knowledge. The second thing is not that. It's handed down by specific universities, by specific people, like Buddha of Buddhism, or Christ of Christianity, or say Joyson speaking on behalf of IIT Kharagpur, or some computer scientist talking about his branch of computer science, or Amartya Sen talking about economics. So that becomes very personal. So if you have to understand Indian knowledge system, we have to understand both the sides, impersonal, the universal on the one hand, and the personified, the things which are embedded in space and time on the other hand. The beauty, the strength of Indian knowledge system is that it's very scientific, having the first part. Because if you look at the 10 avatars of India, starting with the Darwinian sequence of evolution, from the amphibian model to the meditative model of the Buddha, and finally a 10th one who is expected to take us to the next golden age. And if you remove all the avatars of India from the pantheon of Indian knowledge system, nothing happens to Indian spirituality or Indian knowledge system, because it's independent of the individual personified movements that are set up by these people, including the tantras. We have the various tantras like Vishwa Tantra, which is about global knowledge, Praja Tantra, which is about people, Ganatantra, which is about democracy, Raj Tantra, which is about monarchy and autocratic systems, the various kinds of tantras, which we call looming, weaving systems, and the various shastras that we have. So the beauty, the conceptual foundation of Indian knowledge system is to understand both the systems side by side. And this is something which the world needs to recover, so to have the balance. Now, this is what the sages had said, time and again it has struck back. It talks about ekasad bipra bahuda vadanti. That means the truth is one, but it can be manifested and established under various names. So someone who is heading for the truth, we call it prognosis. It's a medical term. The word gnosis comes from the Indian Sanskrit root gnya, gyan. Gnya means to know, just not intellectually, but also emotively, and also with regard to rapture. In the same way, the mother conceives a child. In the same way, a poet writes or pens a few lines of his or her poem. In the same way, the man of realization realizes the truth of the cosmos. That's education. So that's gnosis. So Indian knowledge system is essentially not intellectual only. It's gnostic. It's gnostic. And once you have got that gnosis, you come back. You have a two-way, a dia, and that's where the word has evolved. It's called diagnosis. So the art of education is also the art of healing, the art of therapeutics, catharsis, tapasya, and it's a manifestation of the truth within. So the very interesting thing about India is that it's actually a descending framework, like the ancient tree, which has the root below and the branches above, is actually a tree which has the root above and the branches below. So it's very important, to understand that one of the most important foundations of Indian knowledge system, which is the tree, is also the foundation of modern information system, which is graph theory and understanding the tree. The entire advent of information systems, big data analytics, organizing the data over space and time and getting meaning out of it, is based on a premise which was there in India for thousands and thousands of years. And that's the few next slides. So the tree and the seed and the tree, knowledge in a small form and knowledge in an expanded form, is actually a contraction and expansion of knowledge systems in the gray scales. So nothing is black and white, nothing is day and night, nothing is good and evil. Everything is a lesser truth or a greater truth. You're moving from a lesser system of knowledge to a greater system of knowledge. So Indian knowledge system does not only believe in which is dialectical or diabolical, but it is also dialogical. And finally, it is integral, it's holistic. And it's a very important concept to be understood by the areas of knowledge to come. So this is a recovery which is a need of the hour. and the same simile of the root above and the root and the branches below is valid here. Now, this is a concept which was tapped by Professor Norbert Wiener at MIT in the 1930s, and he talked about a very important system called cybernetics, where he talked about knowledge at the physical level, which you can measure, and then knowledge at the thinking level, which is the smart level, the memories, the smritis, which is the mental level, and there's a knowledge at the cognitive level. He calls that cybernetics 3, where the knowledge is just not external, it's a part of the knowledge. When Dr. Radhakrishnan is walking the corridors of an institution, he is the institution. The brick and mortar that Professor Sinha was talking about again and again does not make an institution. It is the people, the gurus, the murshids, the great prophets of knowledge, a Plato or a Vivekananda, who makes a difference in the corridors of a university. And then knowledge proceeds to stage 4, which is cybernetics 4, which is cosmological. Now, the beautiful thing is, a lot of these constructs of Indian knowledge, the 4 stages of Indian mind, as the rishis and sages have conceived, is having an echo in modern scientific system. This is cybernetics. And this is exactly what we are trying to do at IIT Kharagpur in our new Center of Indian Knowledge System. And this is where we cut an edge. This is something which India alone can provide because of its genetic algorithm, which spans for 10,000 years of education, if not more. At least we have a written document of 10,000 years of history. The history of Indus Valley civilizations, the recent discoveries at Ratnagiri and Pompuhar in Coromandel Coast has taken back the Indian history to about 12,000 BC, which is pretty old. It's one of the oldest civilizations in the world, ever proved by geoastronomical, archaeoastronomical, and pure archaeological knowledge. So our knowledge is essentially just not linear, it's also complementary and cyclic. Reductionist Western knowledge like this is physics, that's biology, this is computer science, is all gone, which Professor Sinha was saying, and it's just gone out of the window. Today we have all pervading, all cross-cutting knowledge. The temperature cycle, which we study in physics, it's also a part of nanochemistry and nanosciences. It's also a part of the Vedantic ontology of Agni and Soma, which is fire and water. It's also a part of the life cycle analysis of environmental sciences. And as Professor Nina said, today is World Environmental Day, and this is something which we need to understand. So Indian system is essentially cyclic and it's non-linear, and that is where it goes back to the ancient wisdom, the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, and this is a concept which inspired Kekule to invent organic chemistry. The 6 spec orb of the benzene ring, C6H6, and this is something which is very, very important to understand. And what is so great about Indian knowledge system? For some reason, in the last 2000 years or so, it got lost. After the fall of Buddhism in India and its separation from Vedanta of Shankaracharya, there was a great fall and decay in Indian education system, and most of our great education systems was lost. And then we had to open up to the West and be exposed to the red line, which is a reductionist system. And I mean, you do this, you be a specialist in this, and you're not worried about rest of the things. But that's not true. I mean, these are the words of Vivekananda from his wonderful work, Macrocosm and Microcosm. And he says, we have to go one step further. And what is that? That every evolution is preceded by an involution, which means that every shishya or disciple is preceded by the knowledge of the guru. And today's disciple is the guru of tomorrow. So knowledge is space and time. It's continuous. It's a continuum. It's not what Professor Sinha just said before me. It's not a 2 years, 3 years degree. It's lifelong. It's over many lives. It's a parampara. And Indian education system is a system of parampara, which is Gurukul. It is the Aranyak, the green cottages of our rishis, where students is to go, not just to have knowledge, but see it in sync with the sunlight, with the bees flowing in the gardens and the flowers blooming. These are the poetries of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. This is where knowledge becomes wisdom. when you pick up a line of color fundamentals in physics, and then the teacher, the guru, gives you an example right in the garden of the variations of colors in the garden itself. And this is really expounded by the three great scholars of today, of the Isalian Institute. That's Arnold Toynbee, Abraham Maslow, and Alan Watts, the big 3A. And all three of them has talked about the great need and the recovery of Indian knowledge systems that can save the world of tomorrow. Alan Watts, Abraham Maslow, and Arnold Toynbee. It's very, very important that our students are exposed to this kind of exchanges. So the most important thing is just not to look at the periphery or the branches, but also to look at the Tao. To paraphrase an old Chinese saying, that spirituality or mysticism may understand just the roots and not the branches, and the scientists may understand the branches and not the roots. But science does not need mysticism, and mysticism does not need science, but humanity needs both. So a system of education is coming where Western and Indian form of education needs to coalesce and become an integral whole, which is a knowledge of humanity, which is a birthright and the eternal right of all the humane population in the world. So with this, I come to part two, and this will be very quick because Professor Sinha has already expanded on that. Some of the earliest education systems were there in India, and this is the Citadel of Mahindra, which is about 6,000 years old. And if you look at this entire campus, this is almost the main building of Jawaharlal Nehru University or something that we have in IIT Kharagpur. And there was a hall of the priest. There was a great gathering space. There was a place which was used for recreation and other kind of things. So this was like the citadel on the great mound. And this was a kind of a city system, which was a precursor, which the Greek cities will have after 1,500 years. Like they will have a Acropolis on the top of the hill and the Agorapolis below. So a lot of town planning knowledge that we say are Greek actually had originated from Indus Valley, and perhaps from there it had flown towards the Mediterranean world. We all know the missionaries of Ashoka, which were sent to Southeast Asia. There was also a branch that went to Greece, Syria, and the Mediterranean, and there was a huge impact of that branch on the knowledge systems of Alexandria, including the genesis of Christianity. So there is a huge history that needs to be recovered and looked into in great detail. And as Professor Sinha has said, our knowledge system was extremely universal, Catholic, and it was cosmic. It was just not universal and Catholic, but it was also cosmic. So cosmology was taught with epistemology and spirituality. Martial arts was taught with medicine. So it was very holistic. From Nalanda to Amaravati, everything was very holistic. And this is a view of Takit Bai that you see on the right middle, which was there in the Karakorams. And this was an international university about 200 years prior to the birth of Jesus Christ. And this is a place where people used to come from all over Asia, including Greece. And this is the time of the Kushanas and the Sakas and the Sungas in India, which is really an uncharted history of Indian civilization, which has been neglected. And some historians say probably there's an extra 500 to 800 years which are hidden there, which can expand Indian history. And the birth of Buddha can go back to beyond 1500 BC. So these are areas that needs to be explored and rewritten. And what is that recovery? I'll give you a snapshot. There are three people in the modern India who has actually started this recovery. One was Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, his experiments of India for the whole world, that is Vishwavarati. We need to look at Tagore's experiment once more, Gandhiji at Sabarmati, and of course Sri Aurobindo and Mother Alfasa working as per the United Nations Charter at Auroville, getting two students of Frank Lloyd Wright and Le Corbusier, which was František Samner and Antonio Raymond. They came and designed this wonderful 50,000 carrying capacity township based on intellectual and spiritual education. That's the model of education. We need to look at this model. So it has already started before IIT Kharagpur or before Ashoka. And these are some of the great doyens of the 19th, 20th century, a paradigm where people are changing first before we change the environment. So, as Amos Rappaport says, one needs to change first before you change others. Physicians, heal thyself before you heal others. So, this is from Luke in the New Testament. So, first, this is the ancient saying of the Upanishad, Atmana Mokshatha. You need your own salvation before you start teaching the whole world. So this is the Indian way which the whole world needs to understand. So with this, I come to the last part about retreat. So today it's all about philosophers and intellectual retreat. So what is that retreat? What is that way to the future? And how will the Indian knowledge system evolve? There was a huge hue and cry about 250 years back after the Macaulay onslaught that is India really civilized? And then after Professor John Woodruff had written this wonderful book, and after Swami Vivekananda had made that impact in Chicago in 1893, and after Sir Jamshedji Tata came back to India and developed the indigenous knowledge of steel technology in India, it all turned. And then great changes were offing, like Professor L. Basham writing books like The Wonder That Was India, and the position of great women, like Nivedita, like Mother Mira Alfeza, like Nishita, the daughter of President Wilson, like Alice Bonner, who was the disciple of Pandit Uday Shankar. So these are four ladies who came from Western lands, and they dedicated their entire lives to the upbringing of Indian knowledge system. So this needs to enter our course book, into our history of human civilization. Our students need to be fully aware of this. They should not be only taught, a Martin Luther or a Francis Bacon or a Rene Descartes or a Sigmund Freud. We need to be strong in our own history and the history of Indian knowledge system. So about 6 or 7 slides I'll go very quickly, is very contribute. We all know today Sanskrit has been discovered as the most powerful knowledge language system which can run a computer and decipher other knowledge, because Sanskrit is the only language system which has about 49 syntaxes or alphabets, and we call that the NLP, the natural language processing. So the whole world is taken aback by the amazement and the great science that is embedded in the structural, ontic, and epistemic knowledge of Sanskrit itself. Next, we come to music. Indian music, or the systems of ragas, strikes Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And today, Microsoft's experiments has proved that about 4,000 years back, a lot of Indian ragas were just the precursors to the first Western music. Like Rag Bilawal was Ionian mode, and Rag Todi was Locrian mode. So these are discoveries which are possible through the Cepstrum knowledge, the MATLAB software, and through the knowledge of the circle of fifths. So this is about Indian music. This is about Indian mathematics, where till about 14th or 15th century, there was no single book of mathematics in the West. An Indian numeric system, including the knowledge of zero, which is Shunya, and one, which is Advaitam, or one, was converted by an Arabic knowledge man whose name was Al-Khawarizm, and that was the only book in which was taught to the Western people till about 14th and 15th century. And Bertrand Russell talks about that. It was from this book that the West first learned of what we call Arabic numerals, which ought to be called Indian. So the great contribution of India's knowledge systems to the system of binary 0 and 1, which is a foundation of computerized system, needs to be looked at in great detail. The most important things is about Indian mathematical system, which has both the values. One is an absolute value, and second is a positional value. And this is a great French mathematician Laplace who talks about the great things about dasam, which is decimal system, and which is the foundation of all decimal and log normal systems of mathematical distributions today, which is the interconnect between geometry, positional astronomy, heliocentric knowledge, and architecture. And a lot of our Vastu Vidya architecture needs to be clarified with knowledge. Many of our architects are not aware of these connections, because the entire footprint or the footfall of the plans and the elevations that we have of our Indian temples is actually a reflection of this positional astronomy. So this is absolutely a new area of knowledge which can be decoded and deciphered. The other area is that of iconography, and we need to look. These are some of the products of our science and heritage, and we did several exhibitions in India in different portions of the world. We had collaborations with Georgia Tech, with Columbia, with Japanese universities. And this is one of our students where there are striking similarities between a Buddhist Chaitya hall and a Christian church. And Will Durant, Russell, James Ferguson, and Percy Brown has talked about the striking similarities. And some of our Indian students are very excited. So Indian iconography, Indian semantics, Indian semiotics needs to be looked at in great detail. So if you are talking about recovery, what recovery are we talking about? So these are some of the examples, the conceptual examples which needs to be recovered. And this is what we are planning in the Center of Indian Knowledge System. So I'm almost coming to the end of my slide. So this is a historic school of Athens and the fight that happened between the ancient Greek philosophers. The last was Plato, and the new way of aristocracy which had to be started, which was started by the great philosopher, the guru of Alexander, that was Aristotle. Alexander was very pragmatic, and he led to the materialistic sciences and philosophy of the next 2000 years of Europe, something to which we are all trained in the Western form of education. But Plato reminded from the Oriental exposure, from the Milesian, the Persian, and the Indian schools, which had an exposure to more ancient Greece, which was not in Mediterranean, but it was in Asia, it was in Miletus, and it was exposed to one of the eternal philosophies of India, which was Sankhya, the philosophy of numbers. And Plato said, philosophy, working philosophy, application of philosophy, science and technology cannot just be grounded and pragmatic only. It needs to have a way up. Your microcosm should be connected to the macrocosm, to the larger concern. Then Aristotle said, but we need to be grounded, we need to be pragmatic, we need to be aggressive, we need to be taking over systems. Then Plato said, if you're doing that, then you'll be creating an educational system which will destroy the world within a few hundred years. And it will create a crisis in civilization. It will create wars, which we have seen in the last 100 years. And it will create environmental chaos and ecological havocs, which Al Gore has talked about in The Inconvenient Truth. And Plato had warned, fine, you have to be grounded and materialistic, but you should also have a larger philosophy, a philosophy which is just not in books, but a philosophy which is in the way of life, which is in the form of the impersonal and the universal, the Shrutis, which needs to be connected with your grounded philosophy, which you are talking about. So what Plato and Aristotle disagreed, converged and did not converge, is the eternal Indian foundation of what I showed in the initial slide. So that is the conceptual recovery that we need to do in our Indian knowledge system, because it is only through that there can be a conceptual rectification, there can be a conceptual augmentation, and there can be a conceptual garnering of world knowledge system by the power of an ancient system of Indian knowledge wisdom systems, which has been there handed down over thousands of years, and it is just waiting for a recovery. In the words of Sri Aurobindo, that it is just waiting for a recovery, and it will change the whole world once it is done. So these are extremely hopeful world, and I really thank Sushant for giving us this platform to share this opportunity, a golden opportunity, which is in the offing, which will change the destiny of the 22nd and the 23rd century, and many more things will come. And I think the great wisdom which is there in India will be recovered. So with this, I thank you again, and I hope I made some sense to all of you. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing and I'll go back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sen. It was absolutely amazing. I mean, this connect that you made with the West and the East, and how looking at India as a great place of hope. That's primarily what we at Sushant are trying to do. We are trying to locate, look inwards and look at what we can achieve and what we have achieved. So thank you so much for highlighting that.
Thank you.
Looking
Right.
forward to speaking with you again in the future about
Yeah.
this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for giving this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Right. For our next session, holistic education is based on the premise that each person finds identity, meaning, and purpose in life through connections to the community, to the natural world, and to spiritual values such as compassion and peace. We have our next panelist, Dr. Naga Rajpathi, to elaborate on the same. Dr. Paturi is a senior professor with 3 decades of university teaching research experience, including fieldwork based culture research. He specializes in culture studies, including folk culture studies, linguistics, including Sanskrit linguistics, literary studies, including myth studies. Trained in Sanskrit and Advaita Vedanta by his hyper polyglot, polymath, and spiritually accomplished Sakla Shastra Parangat father, he is seriously committed to the transmission of Vedic sciences to the present generation. Presently, he is director Indic Academy. Let's welcome Dr. Paturi.
I think, yeah, now I unmuted myself. Okay, so I thank Shushanti University and the faculty, Nina, Anushka, and others for giving me this opportunity. This is the moment in Indian history when things like this are happening in a big way. Sri Aurobindo in his days predicted that something like this would happen at this time of Indian history, and all that prediction is coming true. All these attempts of bringing Indian education, ancient Indian value to the contemporary education, all these are happening now, and that is happening without the knowledge of each other. Each institute, each university is doing it independent of each other, and then they are joining. That shows that there is something that is happening in the uh, power of the era, or what they say, ethos of the era at a global level. And that ethos can be understood either spiritually or from a rational, pragmatic point of view. This is a great moment in the history of the world education itself. And this is happening at a time when, like any other walk of life, any other field of life, education is also getting globalized. And this globalization of education is both ways. Students from countries like India are traveling abroad for learning. That has been happening from a very very long time. Even during the colonial days, Indians went abroad to study, say for example in England. But the new development is that the students of the countries to which Indians used to go are now coming to India to learn from India. That is a new development. So this is the area about which I'm going to spend my few minutes of talk here. Uh, the topic that is allotted to me is components of education that our universities, Indian universities, can offer to the global educational system, to the global uh, faculty that would like to come to India to learn about what they could teach in their own universities, and the students who could come to India to learn from Indian teachers. Here, we have been talking about Swami Vivekananda going abroad, telling them about Hinduism and its greatness and other things. But let us remember that during that time, it was 19th century, we were telling them that here in India, we are strong in spiritual aspects, and there in the West, you are strong in your technology, science, and other developments. So we offer you spiritual knowledge, and you please offer to us your science and technology knowledge. Now the time has completely changed. We are in 21st century. We have gone, we have walked a lot of distance from Swami Vivekananda today. Today we are not saying that we are going to offer only the spiritual knowledge to them. We are talking of areas of mundane education. In the Upanishadic language, we have classified learning into Paravidya and Aparavidya. Paravidya is the spiritual side, but there is Aparavidya also. On the Aparavidya side also, there is a lot that India can offer to the universities outside. And there is another classification, Vidya and Avidya. What is classified as Avidya is this mundane knowledge. Even on the side of mundane knowledge, there is so much that we can offer to the universities abroad, particularly the Western universities, and the students there, the parents there, the teachers there. There we have to be a little cautious. We are not saying that we are going to offer you better physics, better chemistry, better botany, better zoology, everything. No, but there are some areas where ancient Indian knowledge of this aparavidya, mundane education, in those areas India has excelled. There, actually, that is how it happens. Electricity flows from higher potential to lower potential, water flows from higher level to lower level in each area. If a particular university is strong in a certain area, for example, if they are very strong in physics or engineering, our students go there and learn those subjects like physics and engineering from there. In the same way, if we are strong in certain areas, stronger than them, then they would come here. Those areas, I'm going to list those areas under various components. Particularly, the present university classification of these areas is basically the broadest classification is in terms of academic components and professional components. In that is what Sushant University, in a message to me, called vocational education, professional education, and the other side is the academic education. In the academic universities, there is a classification with a little difference from university to university as humanities, social sciences, and sciences. And in the present universities all over the world, humanities are receiving a very raw deal, and particularly in terms of prestige, because these are the days when anything that is science or scientific is respected a lot. This is where India can offer a lot to the world. It is in India that these areas which are studied under humanities in all over the world universities, the same areas have been sciences in India rather than non-sciences as it is observed in all the universities. Why humanities are receiving a raw deal is because they are looked at as non-science departments. But here in India, we have sciences for each of them. We have a science of, for example, almost even in Indian universities, we have departments like Department of English, Department of Tamil, Department of Hindi, or Department of Gujarati. Departments classified on the name of in the name of languages and regional basis. But for us, it is Shastra, which is common for all. So we don't call it a department of English. We in this classification, it will be a department of literary study or a department of poetics. Then it is applied to each of the regional languages of the world, entire world. So then, when you go to the literary study, you have what they call on the Greek parlance poetics. But here in India, we call it Alankara Shastra. It is Shastra. And because it is a Shastra, it is connected interdisciplinarily or inter-Shastra, we can say. There is an inter-Shastra relationship of Alankara Shastra with many, many other Shastras. like say for example Mimamsa Shastra or Nyaya Shastra or Vyakarana Shastra or Tantra or all other disciplines. For example, Abhinavagupta was a Tantrika, and he was borrowing from Bhartrihari's Vyakarana Shastra from Vakyapadiyam, and he was applying it to his Abhinava Bharati or Lochana, all these expositions of poetics and Natya Shastra, science of dance. So here you have a science of dance, science of dance. Uh, we cannot see you. What's happening? What can I do for that? This interface is not known to me. So if there is anything that you can do from your side, you please do that. Yeah. Am I visible now? I think yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I took time to figure out how I can make myself visible. Okay, so now the point is that you have a Shastra for each of these fields which are classified under humanities on the academic side and the academic universities, and how these Shastras are Shastric, how they are rigorous, how they are methodological. All these things, if they are conveyed to the world audience, to the global audience of various literatures, and if we tell them that please stop doing this department of Greece, department of English, department of French, and let us have a reclassification of these disciplines. Let us call them all science of literature, science of poetry, science of dance, science of drama, science of music, and class, and put all these things under the umbrella of sciences only, and we have shastras for all these. That will be a great contribution to the global academics. The entire global academics, particularly on the humanities side, they'll be very proud to know that their disciplines come under sciences, and they have a rigorous study of all these sciences. And if they come to know, for example, that fine arts, what are classified as fine arts, music, dance, etc., also have highly rigorous science, so rigorous that today there is computational music. A friend of mine, Professor Vinod Vidwans, who is the Dean of Fine Arts and Performing Arts at Flame University, Pune, he has created a robotic machine, a computer that can do its own independent classical music concert in Hindustani. It can compose its own bandish. All the coding that is behind it, all the artificial intelligence coding that is behind it is based purely on Indian Shastras of music, Sangita Shastra, Narada Smriti, Bharata Natya Shastra, etc. And the similar thing can be done to Natya. You can create a dancing robo using this. And there is in Carnegie Mellon University, there is a project of sentiment analysis, and using our aesthetics from Natya Shastra, Dhvanyaloka, all these disciplines, we can show that a highly sophisticated computational sentiment analysis can be done, but more rigorous and more intricate than the one that is being done, for example, used by Google and other resources now of sentiment analysis can be done. So when the humanities departments people, fine arts people, performing arts people, all these people come to know that there is such an exactness in the shastras and sciences that are dealing with these areas, they would definitely be very proud and they would be ready to learn all these inputs from the ancient Indian background. And if you come to social sciences again, the social science areas also are actually, it's a fact, let us be very frank and agree, that on the university campuses, science and technology departments have a higher social status than even social sciences. Even among social sciences, those social sciences which are close to mathematics, for example, economics, which has lots of mathematical inputs, and sociology, where there is quantitative research dominated, inductive quantitative research that dominates. Those disciplines have a higher status than those social sciences which do not use any mathematical models or mathematical analysis, graphs, or such aspects. But here in India, we had the areas covered under the contemporary social sciences dealt by Shastras. One of the biggest areas that India could offer, from philosophy to social sciences, is in the areas of, say, for example, philosophy of science itself. And science departments, unfortunately, even in India or abroad today, they do not cover areas of philosophy of science under the science departments. But in the area of philosophy of science, you have so much to be contributed from the ancient Indian background of analysis of what is Shastra, what is logic, what is critical thinking, what is a debate, what is the correct side of the debate, what are the kinds of proofs, all these things are established. And another area is, for example, on the philosophy side, which is now being borrowed into almost all the social science departments. Social science departments have been, earlier had been, they were aspiring for a value-free, objective study. But gradually in public administration, for example, there are developments of new public administration, new public management, all these areas there they are talking about value oriented public administration, value oriented public management. On the management fields also, there is now an urge for value oriented management, humanitarian management, public choice model, all these areas where in India you can borrow from philosophy, the area which traditionally, conventionally in the Western universities was called under social philosophy, and that is the area where ethics is covered. And in the area of normative ethics, they under social philosophy, they used to think that they have a lot to offer in terms of classification of these ethics and utilitarian ethics, and under that you have Stuart Mill kind of people. But here in India, you have a huge area called Dharma Shastra, and this Dharma Shastra is not limited to what they call ethics. One big area where India can contribute to all the three components, humanities, social sciences, and contemporary sciences, is ecology, environmental awareness. And now it is the most contemporary area. And Dharma, there is a talk I gave on how Dharma by definition is an ecological approach. Dharma by definition, the very etymology of the word Dharma is that which sustains. And this approach of sustainable development and sustainability, all these are new words after environmental awareness into the Western philosophy of ethics. But whereas in India, Dharma has always been an ecological concept. So ethics have always been ecological. So there is nothing like newly coined environmental ethics. All ethics have to be environmental, was the argument. And once you bring environmental awareness, which has been the core of Vedic approach and ancient Indian approach, to the core of all the studies, humanities, social sciences, and sciences, then what you're doing is, actually nowadays there is a lamentation in the social sciences departments in the universities that the science departments are not aware of social issues, and they are frogs in the well. They don't know what is happening in the society and all that. But if you are going environmental, if you are going ecological, if you are going nature oriented and nature friendly, you can build a natural science based social science, because it is from the natural sciences like biology, botany, that you are getting ecological awareness today in the contemporary academics. And it is the fields like geography, which are now classified in the social sciences, that you are going into environmental science. Then if you are showing from the ancient Indian approach to ecology that these areas of geography, botany, from where the ecological awareness is coming, they are all integrated into social sciences, particularly philosophy, particularly social philosophy, which is ethics area. If you show a new kind of interdisciplinary linkage, multidisciplinary understanding of issues, then you will be bringing a totally new interdisciplinary area of dharma studies, and this will be a great contribution that India can do. In the beginning of the introduction of this talk, it was mentioned holistic. This holistic approach, particularly eschatologically, eschatology is the word used for goals of life in a particular worldview. Indian worldview, ancient Indian worldview, Hindu worldview, Vedic worldview had an eschatological approach called Chaturvidha Purusharthas: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And moksha area, which Swami Vivekananda was emphasizing, was one of the purusharthas only. You have the entire dharma, artha, and kama areas. And the artha and kama areas, the purushartha areas, are very strongly emphasized here in India from the beginning. So this dharma area is the anchor for both artha and kama. So these artha kama areas that are emphasized in the other social sciences and humanities departments, when you show that the dharma area is the anchor for all these things, and within philosophy departments, the lost importance for social philosophy that you have in philosophy departments today, I don't see any significance given to social philosophy or ethics side, but this will bring back that significance. And significance for philosophy of science, which is growing only inside the philosophy departments today, not spreading to the science departments, will grow into significance towards the science departments also, and science departments also would look towards the humanities and social sciences for this kind of a dharma based understanding of their explorations into nature studies and all that. So here in Hyderabad, the ICRISAT buses, the ICRISAT is an agricultural research organization, international organization. On their buses, there is a slogan: "Science with human face." So this slogan was required after environmental analysis, environmental awareness. So science is now trying to justify itself with a human face. So now that human face, which is a nature-friendly face or environmental-friendly face, can come to sciences when sciences are dharma-based, because dharma-based basically is this area, and there will be a new integration of these areas of humanities, social sciences, and sciences based on such areas like social philosophy and philosophy of science, which lost their significance within philosophy departments, and that significance can be brought back. And you have areas where, for example, certain areas, professional areas, if we come back to professional areas, within professional areas, you have already Ayurveda and yoga are a big success story all over the world. And what we are doing is we are talking of yoga as something separate and Ayurveda as something separate from the present approaches to health and wellness. But what needs to be done is that there is in Ayurveda there is an Indic research methodology in the name of Tantra Yuktis that is offered, and that Indic research methodology that is there in Ayurveda for this, and medical ethics, which is not at all covered in any medical course nowadays. Medical ethics are being covered only under philosophy departments. Medical colleges do not teach any medical ethics at all. Philosophy of medicine is not taught in medical colleges. So it is in these areas that we have so much to offer. We have so much to offer on the side of medical ethics, philosophy of medicine, from fields like Ayurveda. What is Ayurveda? Is Veda of Ayush. It is a science of health. So instead of defining disease, it is better to define health and say that if health is not there, that is a problem. And that philosophy of what is health and how health is connected to nature, how health is connected to the inner world and the outer world are connected, how ethics are connected to health, how seasons are connected to health, how different regions of the world and the seasons there can be connected to health. These things are not the present components of any medical education anywhere in the world. Those things can be offered from India. And yoga is already being taken very seriously all over the world, and but how yoga can be integrated, say for example, Ayurveda has an integration of yoga already, But the medical education today all over the world, the contemporary English medical education or allopathic medical education can learn from this integration of yoga and Ayurveda how medical education can integrate inner world practices, psychological practices with physical medical practices, physical medical techniques and methods. So these are some of the professional areas, and from the side of some other vocational areas that we can see the one thing we have to learn from ancient India about ancient India is that professional education of all the vocations, all the occupations was part of traditional hereditary learning as part of hereditary social groups. These hereditary social groups were given the name caste, and because of a high propaganda about caste as a very bad system, by unnecessarily uh, uh, actually uh, creating an impression that caste is all about hierarchy, social discrimination, and all that. This beauty of the traditional caste system as hereditary educational system, hereditary teaching of occupations from the birth itself in the house is hidden. And also we should also be aware and educate everyone that that kind of education, that kind of hereditary social system is now weakened. It is not there. We are now choosing our own occupations irrespective of the birth that we take. So what needs to be done is now, because everyone is learning everything, every occupation, that kind of hereditarily protected knowledge inside India, for example, ancient fishermen's knowledge, ancient agricultural knowledge, ancient ethnomedical knowledge, ancient all these indigenous folk knowledge systems that existed in India in the form of what they call castes has to be retrieved from these elders of these castes. For example, sthapatya, sculpting, was the occupation, profession of five different Vishwakarma castes in India. There is so much that the metallurgical knowledge and the brass and the other alloy kind of knowledge and the sculptural knowledge and the architectural knowledge that these five community knowledges that can offer to the contemporary world. And the contemporary sculptors, contemporary architects can learn from these ancient knowledge systems, and that how to do that is a big strategic plan that we have to think of. But we have to be aware that we should not only always think of learning from the Vedas or learning from some Sanskrit Shastras. It is these areas, folk knowledge systems also, from which we have so much to learn. And it is inside the city, it is inside the wish, it is from the word wish that we get the word Vaishya. So the core city was very active with all these occupational knowledge systems that were taught from the parental generation to the children's generation. So all, and society was always active in this mundane knowledge of these occupations which paid them back money. But the areas like humanities and philosophy, those were subjects at the forest-based gurukulas, where king used to go and learn from the rishi. King's children, princes, used to go and learn from the rishi. And those four areas which used to offer thinking methods, logical methods, philosophical foundations, those were all inside the gurukulas of the forest. And now, because we are universities, we are also actually kind of all our campuses are also built away from the city, but they gradually become part of the city, and that is why we are getting all this impression that universities are part of the city. But the idea of we doing this kind of understanding, having this understanding away from the city, is now continued inside the universities, university locations even today. So there, all these we have to reassert to the world that the active earning, money earning world inside the city, which was based on occupational, professional knowledge of various occupations and professions, was learning from the philosophy and other humanities departments that were protected in the forest based Gurukulas, that kind of integration between humanities and the professional knowledge, social sciences and professional knowledge, sciences and humanities and social sciences. Those understandings have to be brought back from India. And this model, if it is shown to the world universities, all world universities will be benefited from this kind of integration of various component areas of a holistic education and a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary understanding, a new model for a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary understanding, which is a contemporarily very significant area called environmental studies ecology, will be brought back. That is one thing that I wanted to cover in the short time that is given to me. We at Indic Academy are doing all this. We have conducted series of talks. I gave those talks, 15 talks on how to convert humanities into human sciences and social sciences into better sciences, how to create a new environmental awareness based multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, holistic model of connecting components that are presently existing in contemporary university departments. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Sushant University, Nina ji, Anushka ji, everyone. Thank you very much.
Extremely insightful, sir, extremely insightful. Also, coding is based on music shastras, the exactness in shastras that we not a lot of us are aware of. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for the information. Thank you. Now we move to our next session. Our next speaker for today is Professor H.P. Kincha. Professor H.P. Kincha is the current chairman of Karnataka State Innovation Council. He retired as the Vice Chancellor of Bangalore University in 2011. With over 42 years of teaching and research experience at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, Professor Kincha's contribution to the science and engineering is monumental. Indian Institute of Science, University of Calgary, Canada, National University Singapore, and EPFL Switzerland are some of the few educational organizations that Professor Kincha has active association with. With his unprecedented passion towards engineering and indomitable energy, Professor Kincha continues to contribute by associating with several reputed organizations within India and overseas. We welcome you, Professor Kincha.
Good afternoon to each one. Good afternoon. I think you should confirm my audible, that I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Good afternoon to each one of the members of this particular panel, very distinguished panel. Good afternoon to all the participants who are joining from different parts of the country. I am joining from Bangalore in this particular thing. I have been on this seminar from morning 10 o'clock and listening to my very distinguished previous speakers talking about the issues of starting from technologies, the disruptions that are happening in the education sector, and then talking about the Indian knowledge systems, the richness of the Indian knowledge systems, and the requirements of trying to integrate the present with the past. One integration is in terms of the knowledge, and the other is in terms of the system for the knowledge delivery and that type of things. I think I've been very fascinated to listen to this. I'm also very fortunate that I have also been given this opportunity to speak for about 15-20 minutes. And this session has been called as the thinking session, is what I heard, or what has been told to me, thinking session. And thinking session to me is always like creating dots, different dots of thinking, and that will come, and quite a few of these dots have been created by my previous speakers, and now I will try to add a few more of dots in this particular scenario. And the connection of these dots by an equation ultimately will be the job that will be a very tough job, because it will be a very, very non-linear equation that I will get in connection of these dots, some which go away because of the difficulties and some continue to remain, and things like that. I think that will be the job that will be a long-term job that we done afterwards. So let me try to add my points and my dots into this thought process. I'm an engineer by profession. Electrical engineering is my degree in, and probably I will be speaking an engineer's language and not a social scientist language or the other language. So pardon me for that, that type of engineering language that will be there. Obviously, the subject that is given to us is the globalization of education. And when I was having a meeting with the organizers, and we did debate about the two words, internationalization and deglobalization. And I prefer the word globalization in this context. And what does this globalization mean? Was touched by the earlier speakers also of what is already happening in terms of what we understand as globalization, what we wish that should happen in terms of the globalization in the Indian systems. And we have to also be clear about what will reality make possible in the future of the globalization. Obviously, the education system today is a system that has happened without any concern for geography, and is also a location-independent activity now, I'm saying this in consonance with the first inaugural talk that we had, that this is what is the technology levelizer, that is what the technology does to the education, that geography independent and location independent. And for these two words, geography independent and location independent, we can add on all the disciplines, all the different subject areas, and then try to give these subject areas to them, to the students, to whoever is interested in the different ways. And for all that, we will need what I feel is new academic models. We will need new financial models. We will need new engagement models, and we will need new governance models. I think we will need all these things. And I think if we debate on each one of these components of the new models that we are trying to talk about in the context of what will be the future, which I will try to touch in the next after about 5 minutes or so. The new academic, finance, governance, and the engagement models will have different things coming in that. I cannot touch on all those points that will be coming up in this, but for example, in the governance model, if I were to talk, the governance models of the new education scenario of the future, next 20, 30 years of the future, will have concerns which will be different from the concerns of what is today of importance to the education systems. It may be in terms of the efficiency of doing things. It may be the efficiency of doing things for students, for faculty, and for institutions. It can be the different measures that I use for measurement of the success or failure of the education systems. That will be part of the governance structure of the new education models. If I were to talk in terms of the academic models, then probably location of knowledge will also become an equally important activity as the intellectual capability of the individual in trying to analyze the knowledge and get the knowledge with him. Location of the knowledge also will become very important in terms of the academic models. people may say that, oh, this is not academic. Location of the knowledge is not academic. But in my judgment, I think this is going to become a big subject of debate tomorrow. The location of the right knowledge, in the scenario of an avalanche of knowledge that I may have. How do I do that? In the academic model, also, the issues of what we call as work while study, and the academic models to suit these type of models, work and study. The connectivity of attendance systems with the Right to Education Act, how do we these come into the academic models and the other models of the systems of education that we'll have in the future? I can elaborate on this, but the time will not permit me to elaborate on all these points. But if we say just one point, the work while study, and if I say that the education is given by the technological need anywhere, anytime, whatever that I need, and the students are free to choose the bouquet that they want, and they are free to do the work also when they are studying. And then the questions will come in deciding the academic models, that what is more important to the student, the work or the study? Obviously, the tilt will go towards the work. And then what do the academics do for making the academic activity also interesting for them? Will it be the individual development, or will it be a complete societal development? And these questions will again come up in the future. Will it be the development of the individual or the self only, or will it be the development of the society with the development of individual subsumed into this? Can I make the education in the future a what we call as a thing of enjoyable nature? Otherwise, people will get the frustration and not come for the education. And how do I make that enjoyable in the scenario of work and study together? We can keep on talking about let us say the financial model. If I have to talk about the financial models of the future, the Vivekananda's concept of the 4 pillars of education, to learn, to do, to live, and to be, are the parts of what we say that we do in our university or higher education systems today. And in the new world of the technology, the question that will come is, to learn happens, transfer of information happens, to learn happens. But what about to do? Maybe partially it happens. Virtual labs, or we talk about the virtual labs of the software type and of the hardware types and things like that, and that will happen. But the components of to live and to be self, how do I impart these type of components to the students, and how do I assess and make the right matrices for assessment of these 2 components in a technological world? Because students are not coming to the physical campuses. How do I do that? Is it possible to do that? That is the question that will come. And if it is not possible to do that, will these components have an impact on the financial models of the higher education system in the future? In my judgment, yes. I think we'll need to evolve new financial models for the higher education systems in the future. And what these financial models will be, one of the thoughts that I was reading somewhere was that, will the teacher or the prof today become a teaching executive tomorrow? And if he becomes a teaching executive, then, and if the financial model is tilting towards that teaching executive, then the teaching ability will have to be combined with marketing ability of himself or herself, and try to attract as many students, because the financial model is tilting towards that. Will it be possible to be done? Can I attract students to come to my class? And my financial model of the system works on how many students I have in my class, not on what I want to teach, because the bouquet is selected by the students rather than by the teachers of what they want to learn, These look very simple when we talk, but I think if we try to sit down and try to analyze and try to stitch these into existing systems over a period of time of 10, 15, 20 years, these are very difficult questions to answer, the other question that also comes in this is, if I have to see what is the world that I'm going into tomorrow, where I'm talking about this higher education, what is the type of world that I will be going into, there will be lots of challenges in this world, in this new world, which we call as the VUCA world, the American military terms VUCA world. There will be technical challenges, obviously, technological challenges. There will be disillusionment challenge. There will be the challenge of liberty versus big data. There will be challenge of equity versus the religion of data. There will be challenges of the political type, which will be to the communities, to the immigration issues, to the nationalism issues. There will be challenges in the areas of truth versus ignorance because of the types of Googles that we'll have. There will be challenges in terms of the resilience that will be required, and there will be challenges in terms of the other factors of what we call as the digital factors that will come into picture. This is one view of the world that we can think of the future 15, 20 years, different components. And the education system and the minds of these people who will be there has to be fighting with all these challenges and continue to learn and continue to use this learning. The other possibility of a future seeing is that the man or the human being will lose its importance for work or for war or for economics. I think the man has its importance today because he is able to earn something. He is able to contribute to the economy, or he is able to contribute to the army, or contribute to the war machine, But this importance of human beings in 30, 40 years will go away. Humans will not be what we call as considered as important, because quite a few of these jobs will be done by the machines and by the software, artificial intelligence, whatever that we talk about in the future. So what will happen to the human being? What will be the things of what will be the human beings do in the future is another way to look at the future, In terms of education, if I were to see the future, if I were to see the future of what it is, what it will be, the education scenario would be that the individuals are taught by machines, and by whatever support the human beings may provide to these machines, and the individuals teach whom? Who are the ones who are getting this education? This education, if I say 20 years, are biologically modified individuals. Because of the science progress, because of the technology progress, they are biologically modified. Their gene structures have been modified. Their understanding structures have been modified. And again, that will give the issues of equalities, as I was telling, the equality issues, and that will be a very big issue in my judgment of the future. And if this gene structure modified students or what are sitting in front of me who have an ability to understand, and what is being taught to the students is by the computer or by the machine, which is trying to teach the students at a pace which is suitable to individual students, at a pace or at a requirement level of teaching the right subject to these people, and trying to collect data about me every minute of what I do with this education, how do I take this education in, and how do I absorb this, what are my reaction, how much time I have spent on each one of these, what is that I am doing with these, every activity being recorded back and put it a feedback loop and correcting myself for this will be the type of education that I foresee in the future. So I need new academic models. Obviously, I need new governance models. I need new financial models, and I need new engagement models with the students. And I was just talking with somebody that today the half-life of engineering is about 2.5 years. That means within 2.5 years of the time, the engineer who has been taught something becomes obsolete. And this time period is now shrinking quite a bit with the load of information, data, and the things that are generated by the different means in this world. And if this becomes instantaneous, this half-life becomes instantaneous, then what do I teach? And what do I do with this teaching? Because the moment I teach, the next moment he is an obsolete person again, because that much amount of new information has come. And these will be the type of problems that we'll have to cope up in trying to design the educational models of the future, I just want to tell about the future also in the sense of technology also, which will have a relevance to the education that we give in that world of technology, just from two perspectives. One perspective, if we see, is the perspective of the chessboard model of the Moore's law that is happening in the computing field, which is affecting the computational power, the sensing power, and the memory power, which is affecting every 18 months. The Moore's law is still continuing to hold, and we have gone up to technologies of 2 nanometers and etc. like this. And people say that we are still in the 32nd or 33rd square of the chessboard, which has 64 squares. And this technological step change or accelerating change that is happening is now with a much more dimensionality than it was when we moved from the first square to the second square. Moving from 32nd square to the 33rd square or 34th square has a huge amount of impact, much huge amount of impact, which you can't even imagine in the technological space. And that is the accelerating world of technology that we will be moving into every 18 months or 2 years, So we cannot imagine the things that is going to happen from the technology availability and what will happen to the education on these things. If I see the other component of the world, and that is the environmental component of the world or the Mother Earth component of the world, there is this curves of acceleration and deceleration of all the factors that concern the human beings in this world, whether it is the carbon dioxide, whether it is the temperature of the sea, whether it is the seawater temperatures that I was telling, or whether it is some 35, 37 different parameters, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, carbon dioxide, and all these parameters we are talking. And if you were to plot the curves of these, all these are at a deceleration or acceleration pace. Now, we are talking about not speed, we are talking about acceleration of technology, acceleration of the earth parameters. And then the third is the acceleration of the globalization process, Globalization process, not of movement of people or movement of goods or business possibilities that happen because of the globalization, but the globalization of connection of peoples, the connectivity of peoples that is happening. Now, all these are increasing at this accelerating pace, and the world becomes much more unstable. Very unstable world is what we are moving into. And if this unstable world, the future of education is what again? So we saw it from different view, what the future world is and what the education scenario can be imagined, cannot be imagined, or what we should be thinking about in creating the education system for the new world. I cannot presume that I'll have the same world, and therefore I can do delta exchanges in these models and be a part of the new world that I'm going to see. The other angle from which I will see, this is the last point that I wanted to say on this view of the world in the future. If you see the history of the world, whenever a energy technology and a communication technology have come together, it has given rise to a new generation of things. If you see the first coming together of steam technology or coal technology, and that was the energy technology, and the mixing of this with the printing technology, as was mentioned in the first lecture today, the printing technology, that gave one generation of things in different dimensionalities. And this printing took the education from the elite to a normal platform to be available to everybody. That was the democratization of the education system itself, the democratization of education itself, and that gave new models of education that came into, and what we are now following today also in quite a few dimensionalities. We are just following them together. And this energy technology of steam and the printing technology or the communication technology of printing gave one set of education models. And the second, if I were to tell the energy technologies of the oil technology and the communication technology of the electrical systems, when they came together, they gave another revolution to the societal upbringing, to the societal growth, to the everything that happened. I think this combination of electrical, whether it is telephone technology or the electrical power technology or the technology of oil, give rise to so many things that we can talk about, starting from the highways and living in a suburban areas from a closed area in the center of the city, moving out. This moving out gave rise to the telegraph technology, the rail technologies, the other technologies that we talk about, the growth of the society that we talk about. By the combination of these two, also gave to the education system that the management of industries at that point of time, or the management of businesses at that point of time, the huge railroad systems or the huge oil technologies or the car technologies, the mobility technologies that were there, they were all hierarchical in nature. That is, the people at the down reporting up and up. And the education system was then required to produce engineers or to produce workers which will fit into this hierarchical system. And all our education system got tuned to that hierarchical system of learning to be given that you should follow what your superior says. You should be able to do. Your promotion was linked to how well you followed him, how well you carried out the instructions given to you. That was the system of the education that came in this second thing. And today, from the last 20, 15, 20, 30 years, and maybe for the next 30, 40 years, we are seeing now the congruence of the energy technology of the green energy technologies, and the communication part is the internet component. And these two technologies are now combining together again to revolutionize the whole things, revolutionize the system of industries, the growth of people, the growth of societies, the growth of countries. From the education point of view, this is now bringing the culture of a horizontal education, of a horizontal system of management, rather than the vertical part of the management. The question that comes is, have we changed our education systems to train our individual students, individual people, to be able to fit into this horizontal way of education system, horizontal hierarchy, where communication is the key, where people can take independent decisions up to a particular extent? What will be the consequences of this on our education system is another way to look at the future, for the education system. So I give you different scenarios of the future and how we feel that we should be thinking about educations in these scenarios. Obviously, the education in these scenarios would mean that we have to talk about the graduate attributes, as we very normally call in the outcome-based education, the graduate attributes, and the graduate attributes of the past of good teamwork, good communication, and problem solver, and that these were the graduate attributes that we were trying to give to our students. But do we need a change in these graduate attributes of the future? Are the questions that will come. Yes, obviously we will need change in these graduate attributes that we want to give to our students, to give to our people who want to learn something and make them capable of maneuvering the new VUCA world, I think these have been debated at the WTOs, the World Trade summits that happens in Switzerland every year, and they have given a list of 7, 8, 10 graduate attributes for the new society, for the new 21st society, which starts from trying to cope with the cognition load that every mind, every student will have, and to how to cope with this cognition load will be one thing that we'll have to teach the students, to the efficiency in the social networking and the social platform uses, that will happen in the education system, to the art of making sense, a much more deeper sense of what all that we teach, the art of multidisciplinarity, and the art of trying to be a member of a team in an intercultural way. And will all these things come into the system of the future, is what I think we academicians have to work on for the good models, academic models, research models, governance models of the system, the financial models of the systems, and the engagement model of the students that should all be striving to form in the future. Thank you very much, sir.
Back at 2020, I'm sure we surely are living in a VUCA world, sir. Also, work while study is an important consideration, I'm sure. Thank you so much, sir, for a thought-provoking session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everybody for patient listening.
For the next session, we have with us Dr. Pilar Maria Guerreri and Amaya Stinsma. Dr. Pilar lives between Milan, London, and Delhi since the past 9 years. She holds a PhD with honors in architectural composition, history, and theory from Politecnico di Milano. She has been associate professor at the Italian-Indian G.D. Goenka University branch of Politecnico di Milano in India. She is now affiliated researcher at Ambedkar University and adjunct professor at Politecnico di Milano in Italy. Amaya is a product design student, currently finishing her degree in ESNE, Spain. She has also studied industrial design at Pratt Institute, New York. Moving to and visiting different countries from a very young age informed her interest in how the human and natural worlds are and how they can be. Across cultures and species, she hopes to visit India someday as a part of this journey of learning and collaborating. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anushka.
Okay, so you both have been to different countries in pursuit of knowledge. What do you think are the reasons that a person travels abroad to do the same? Amaya, over to you.
I think to find an experience that you can't encounter in the physical and digital spaces that you have access to where you're coming from. To encounter new people, new ways of thinking, just knowledge that you don't have access within the resources that you have before you move to that new space.
Okay. Amaya?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's basically it. To deepen what is known, to be able to practice the discipline that you're learning in with more diverse people, diverse backgrounds, cultures, to enrich yourself as a person and to further your toolbox that you carry with you and the network of people and humans that you build throughout your life.
Dr. Pilar?
So yes, I believe that what Amaya says is right. I mean, sometimes traveling comes out or traveling or wanting to learn abroad come out of curiosity. Other times it comes from aspirational values, for example. So the idea that what you've read from the books, or which are your inputs that you get from internet, from the net, from the television, kind of push you towards one place to another. So from one end, I believe, like Amaya, that it is it is a push that comes from within. So it is an act of curiosity to learn from the other. And on the other side, there are also some other forces that make us believe or want to work and study in another place. So I think it's a combination of inner forces and inner wills and inclinations, and some forces that come from outside that actually make us believe we want to go and work and study in a certain particular place. I also think we are under the pressure of globalization and internationalization. So it is very much become a trend, the idea of working and going somewhere else, something like a must, that we have to go somewhere else and explore in other countries. So what I think is that that learning, going abroad, means learning a different perspective. So learning a new point of view. So going beyond the process of flattening processes of globalization. So it makes you understand the local and actually really challenge your preconceptions. So I think it's very interesting, the reasons behind why we want to go and work and study abroad.
Right. Now, the forces and the combinations that you both have talked about, the inner push. So, the next question to you, Amaya, is why did you specifically choose US for your studies? Why?
Well, I was born there actually, but I've lived in Spain for most of my life. So I've been exposed to the design scene, especially in Spain, the Mediterranean design scene, a bit of the broader Europe. And I was really curious to live it in the States, in the academic arena before considering working there. And there was this unique opportunity that came up to study a semester in the particular university where I ended up studying it in 2019. And it was a combination of how Pratt has a very unique way of teaching how to live and practice design, different to even other schools in New York and the States and the world. And the fact that there was people from all around the world concentrated in one place was very interesting to me. So, and I wouldn't have been able to afford an experience in a high-end university like that otherwise. So it was just a combination of circumstance and that what they specifically had to offer and what the city was, as a friend told me, as a friend once said, it's front row seats to one of the hubs of humanity, which is what I imagine Delhi is for this side of the world as well. And so it was the excitement, it was the possibility of learning design in a different way, of deepening it. It turns out that it was very complementary to what I had learned and what the gaps from what I had collected and grown through so far here in Spain were seemed to be very well filled with what Pratt had to offer. And I had the opportunity to talk to one of the professors at Pratt here in Spain to ask him specific questions from his point of view. So it wasn't just what it seemed to be from an outside point of view. I got to speak to someone who knew the institution and who knew its ways. And so that gave me a broader perspective and also informed my decision to go over there. And that's it.
Okay. So for Amaya, it was better perspective or different perspective. How about you, Dr. Pilar? Why did you specifically choose India for your studies?
All started as Amaya. Also, for me, was the same. I actually had one person who had helped me to make the decision. I think I would have never been able to choose India if it wasn't for Professor A.G. Krishna Menon, whom I met in Heidelberg, and he, after an email that I sent, was so kind to meet me and made me decide to move to India permanently for many years. So the reason I was looking for a developing country, so I wanted to go out of my comfort zone, and I thought that all of Europe and the United States were too much similar. I mean, they were part of the Western world, and I wanted to analyze a completely different context, which I had never experienced before. So for me, it was really an idea of challenging myself into a context that was absolutely different from my comfort zone. And the choice of India came out of my interest of research, which is cultural exchanges. I've always been fascinated by cultures and how culture affects architecture. And I thought that India had, first of all, the English language, but also a very stratified and interesting mix of cultures that are reflected in architecture. So that was actually, it's a mix of reasons. A country that was completely out of my comfort zone. The idea that I really had a professor who helped me to sort of navigate in India, otherwise was impossible, and the topic that was perfectly fitting my research interest. So somehow it's always, as I said before, it's always a combination of reasons and luck and situation that brought me to India and made me fall in love with it.
Lovely. Maya, you've been traveling for your studies since your childhood, but specifically during your research, what are the challenges that you faced in the US, if you did?
Well, it was all challenges that led to growth. It wasn't because challenge can be looked at as a negative thing or as a positive thing. It was all positive. I was surrounded by an incredible group of people at that point of time that just encouraged me to constantly get out of my comfort zone. We were all our own type of nerd, and we would contage the enthusiasm for life and for the area that we were studying. And it was such a practical experience. I didn't have one single theoretical class, partly because of the selection of classes that I made, but the workshops and just the scale of the amount of departments that there were, the access to different teachers, the collaboration, how we would all cross-pollinate our projects with other students, and we would say, try this, what interaction do you think this has, or whatever. And we also had access to a studio space 24 hours, which is dangerous in its own way. And I did stay overnight on campus quite a few days, but it was the challenge to get out of my comfort zone in many ways, which it already happens so much in a country that's similar, that is a Western country, because I came from Spain, I went to the States. I'm also very curious to hear Dr. Pilar's opinion on that, because there's so much difference and so much space for growth. They really, the perspective of the questioning all the knowledge that I had of design up to then, bringing in critical design practices in one of our classes, which was actually taught by an Indian professor who I have very, very much, who's very dear to me. And I was able to study an official class of biomimicry for the first time. It had all been of my own investigation up to then. So there was there was a rigor and a structure that was brought into certain concepts that I had only aspired to learn to up till then. So it was extremely complementary to the diversification of what industrial design means, because it broadened it past what fabrication and industry and just traditional product design. So that holistic approach that Dr. Joy and Professor H.P. Pincha and Dr. Naga Rajpathi, who I was able to listen to earlier. There's already part of that, and within the Western world, I think design is one of the areas where we have been taught to think of that inclusive ecological way. So I can't even imagine what it is like in a country where that is part of the ethics and for thousands of years and the thinking and the philosophy. So that's my answer.
Good, Amaya. You at least came out of your comfort zone, right? That's good. Anyway, moving to Dr. Pilar, what were your challenges while doing your research in India, if any?
Yes. I mean, it was not just a challenge as a researcher, because I've been juggling between Delhi and London, and I realized how unimaginable was being a researcher in India for somebody who's coming from the West. I'll just give you a few examples just to make clear how different were things. I mean, I'm a very early morning person. So I usually wake up very early, and I was used to be in the library or in the research room from the beginning of the morning, like at 8 o'clock, 8:30. I was already studying and researching in the West. When I reached India, I realized that, for example, nothing starts before 10:30 and 11. And to get to the place, I was like keeping 1 hour, 1 hour and a half buffer to make sure that I was actually reaching to the place where I had to go. It is a very small detail, but when I first reached in India seems huge, because for me was 2 hours lost in the research, and also I was used to work till 8 o'clock at night, and at 5:30 everything was shut. So what I realized was that to be able to do my research, I had to take much more time than expected. And also I had a very funny experience, for example, in one of the libraries in Delhi, university libraries. So when you go to the British Library, you just can decide which book you want. You're sure that where you are going to get it, and then when you have selected the book, you are sure that the book is going to be kept for your research for a very long time. So instead, what in India happened was that I couldn't actually keep the books, but I was looking for books every time, and the day after I couldn't find book anymore, and I was wondering where the book is. And then at the end, I discovered that the students were genuinely hiding the books to be able to find them the day after. So it was a sort of hunt of books that made me discover a huge amount of different books, more than the ones that I wanted to explore in the first place. And also I've learned a lot how to respect, how sometimes to get access to certain documents is not enough to just go to the library, spending hours to the library. Sometimes it is a matter of how you behave or how you are kind to the person. Sometimes if you're kind, you're gonna get more stuff unexpectedly, and sometimes if you are rude and you think that you deserve the document, not necessarily you're going to get it. So doing research in India is very much about which kind of human being you are and how you behave with other people. And sometimes you find the most interesting things in the less expected places. I mean, sometimes you find a document in the house of somebody, which is something that usually in Italy or in the West, the good documents or the unpublished document usually does not sit in the home of someone. So I've really learned how to deal with approximation. So in India, you don't really have a clear idea of facts. I mean, facts are not black and white. Very often there is a good amount of truthful oral history that is not considered valid in the West, which is instead very relevant in India. And also the whole amount of layered history that you have to deal with, which is not taken track as in the West is. So a lot of language discrepancies and document discrepancies and so on. So our mentality of the knowledge as scientific is something that is very biased from the West. So you have completely to put upside down your system of knowledge to be able to be a researcher in India. So I really think the challenge was to change completely my mindset to be able to do research in India, and was my biggest treasure that I've learned.
A book hunting experience has actually shown that sometimes your challenges turn into your favor. They actually prove good for you, right?
Yes, true.
And Amaya, the last question. Now that you hope to come to India for education someday for your studies, what do you expect from India?
It's a really good question. I have never been, as you've said, so my perspective is stereotyped, and I'm sure not exact, but in broad brushstrokes, I'm really excited to I expect to be able to deepen something that could even that is even a question, like they question your sanity if you talk about spirituality and design, but the concept that was mentioned earlier about the roots and the branches, and how science and mysticism and our connection to the earth and to who we are as people, that the ecological approach and like unifying those two things is extremely interesting, and for us to solve the problem that we have in our hands, towards having a more regenerative presence as humans on this planet, I think that's crucial. And we can't become more elevated humans and more elevated professionals without that synergy. Like the little that I know about yoga and Ayurveda, I understand that surgery, even though it's sometimes necessary, if you take out a part of your body, its capacity to self-heal is lessened. So if we are approaching our roles in this planet without focusing on developing ourselves before expecting to be of service to others, to the planet, and are looking at all the modern problems as piecemeal, and professions as like these silos, which is being decentralized, but it still exists. I think we're not going to make it. So everything that I've heard was, the conference so far has really blown my mind, and it has already opened my eyes to new expectations of India, because I've never heard anyone talk about all these different disciplines in the same way, with the possibility of bringing all the sciences to the same level, cross-pollination, there being a gray zone with data, because no science is completely exact. I expect to be surprised. I expect to be flipped completely over, because if I was already shocked by New York, which is still a Western country, I expect to encounter to encounter experiences with my. I know this is all very hokey, but I'm truly excited. For it to smell and sound and look and taste and feel different. I expect a completely different culture to anything that I've lived in, and I can't assume anything else because I don't know enough. But that's basically what I have to say.
But I'm glad that you're like all the more excited to be in India after listening to our speakers. I am glad. Now that we have Amaya's expectations broadly, Pilar, you've been shuttling between Milan, London, and India for the past 9 years, right? So you have actually experienced being here. What do you have to say?
I think that Maya excitement is exactly the same excitement after 10 years of being in India. So I think that is the good thing is that you never get tired of the country. So I think my biggest sorrow and sadness this year was that I couldn't travel to India at all due to this terrible COVID, which I think is gonna leave us at some point. But I have left with some ideas of India, and I ended up with others. So I really modified I would say, the preconceptions that I have. But India is many things together, so a lot of contradictions. So it goes from, yes, a huge amount of spirituality, but a lot of amount of cruelty also. So the idea of being always surprised is always very much there. The idea of tradition, so this history and creativity, sensitivity. I mean, there are democracy, complexity. I mean, there are so many interesting words that can identify India and my experience there. So I think, yes, the idea of learning to be develop critical thinking is something that really India teach you, and to be street smart somehow. And something that I've said before, but I want to say it again, is that humanity becomes sometimes more important than accumulation of knowledge. So there is this human part that you learn, which I think is one of the most important legacies India leaves you behind. That's probably also why I've been so attached to so many people. So there is some part of heart that develops when you are in India. So you really fall in love, not just with the country and with its experience, but also with the people who are there, who makes half of the experience so incredible. So it really teaches you how to take away the lens that you have used up till the moment before you go, and to put another kind of lens on to see the world in a different way. So it was, I must say, the best experience I had in my life.
It was amazing talking to you both and listening to your experiences. And thank you so much for giving us your precious time. Thank you, Amaya. Thank you, Dr. Pilar. Thank you so much. And now we'll move to the question answer session.
Sure.
Thank you, Anushka.
Bye bye.
Thank you for the experience.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity and for being a great moderator.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. We'll have our questions now. So this is from Professor Rao, Director of Engineering from Coimbatore. He's asking how to reach aspirants who are financially disadvantaged. Avinashalingam University, Coimbatore.
Sorry, could you repeat again?
Yeah. How to reach aspirants who are financially disadvantaged. This is from Professor Rao.
So I think Pramath can probably answer that most effectively, because he's sort of done a lot of that at Ashoka and at other places that he started.
So is the question, how do you create access for students who are financially disadvantaged to higher education? Is that the question, Anushka? Your voice was breaking up a little bit. I don't know if it's my bandwidth, but
Yeah.
Should I repeat again?
Is that what the question is? Did you hear? Is that what
Yes,
the question is? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So fair enough. Well, I think education around the world has worked in a model where students who are financially disadvantaged have to be supported. That support can come from multiple sources. That support can come from uh, government scholarships and support. In the US, there are government grants and loans. That's not a very that's available in India, but in small measure. As far as private universities go, our whole model, both at ISB and Ashoka and several other programs that I run, is based on a model where you do make available funds from your budget as well as from philanthropic that will pay students tuition and their living expenses as scholarships. And you build that into your model from day one. So at Ashoka, for example, more than 50% of our students are on some form of scholarship. In fact, almost somewhere between 10 to 15% of our students actually have full scholarships. So we really do try to make Ashoka a place where anyone can who gets to attend regardless of their financial status. In the US, they have a term for it. It's called a full need or a needs blind admission process. Now, it's obviously a tough challenge to be able to do that and to assure everyone who gets in that they will have some form of financial support. And as you scale up, it becomes more and more difficult to do that. But at least the effort is there to make sure that nobody is deprived of the education if they are able to get in and are not able to afford it. And the effort is really in fundraising. I mean, you have to raise funds for these students because they are not going to be able to raise funds for themselves. And to connect them to scholarships and so on. So that's how you really solve this problem. And of course, a lot of educational institutions are also generally subsidized by the philanthropists or the government. And that's how you try to bring the quality of the cost of the education down while maintaining quality. Going back to the point I made, and this is my last point, that I think online and blended education does allow you to bring the cost down even further and make high quality as accessible. And that's a big point that I was trying to make when I showed you the stack of the computer science degree, which is available for roughly 25,000 rupees a semester. I think that's really the idea, that you can actually provide affordable quality education.
Now, the next question is for Dr. Joysen. Dr. Joysen?
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah.
So this one is from our audience. In the face of pandemic, what is the role of the Indian interpretation of higher education? Should I
Okay.
repeat?
I got your question. That's a pretty tricky question. The pandemic is not a new thing. Flus and pandemics has always been there in the history of human civilization. During the First World War and the Second World War, we had pandemics even larger than this. The total number of people who have died in this pandemic is not even 1/10 the people that have died in the First and the Second World War. But the only problem is that today we have too much of information and news feeding, and so I think I'm crossing my point. But the question is, the pandemic has all the bad sides, and is changing the world order. The economy is sort of upturned. The small scale businesses are coming to an end. The logistics and the communication and the recreational industries are extremely hardened. So education is related to all that. That's on the one side, and I think these kind of discussions have been going on in newspaper and media again and again and again. But let's look at the other side. The pandemic has made us patient. It has kept the people at home. You keep meeting your parents more and more normally, which was just done by virtue of a phone call, per week or something. You're giving more time to your children right now. There's a lot of child care and home care and home science, which is increasing. People are spending more time in the kitchen, rather than resorting to fast foods and order foods. So this is another side. So I think if you look at the first side, the second side, the third side, there are a lot of sides. And when you add up all that, when you look at the mask, for example, the mask was there for about 3,000, 4,000 years in India. It's a part of the Jaina Digambar tradition, thousands of years. Ablution and cleaning hands. It's a part of home science education, was always there. It is only recently, because of our exposure, we have been used to getting into the home right with our shoes and not putting it outside and cleaning our hands. So some of these habits, which looks health oriented or health driven, were there in the Orient or in Asia or in India for hundreds and thousands of years. So I cannot go like this point by point. What I'm trying to say is that the pandemic has done layers of things to our mindset and habit and livability, our ability to live in synchronization with the people around, the nature around, pay respect and maintain some kind of physical distance, not social distance, some kind of physical distance. And this kind of restraints were already there in our society. So the education, just not with books and schools and colleges, but at the level of home science, at the level of public science, the level of general living sciences, livelihoods, and our senses. There's a very important thing in urban planning right now, which is called sensibility. We use the right senses so that it sharpens our ability to look at the environment in a way which we haven't looked at before. This is a kind of new thing which is happening in MIT and NUS, Singapore. So this kind of things could be a invention under the ambit of modern education. But I think in the Indian context, they're all there. The use of deep senses, the use of respect, the application of restraint in our behavior, a lot of good home science with regard to ablution, health maintenance, restraints in our public behavior. They're all part of our Nyaya Shastra, our Smritis, and our moral, social, and ethical code for hundreds and thousands of years. So I think much of the pandemic impact can be looked into in this angle, provided we have the time and the patience and the empathy. I think empathy is a very important word. Provided we have the right empathy and we are vibrating, we are resonating with the same vibes. I'll end with this last statement. There are things which keeps on changing. Technology, algorithm, computers, new generation, but there are few things which never changes. I think the empathy which Amaya and Dr. Piller, which they have shown in their talks, is the same empathy which I think two students had shown 2,000 years back in Nalanda or Takshila when they came from China or from Turkey or from Turkestan or from Russia. Yeah. So I think these are things which never change. So our life is a combination of things which change plus things which never change. Somehow, in our modern education, we have over attended the first part and we have become oblivious of the second part. So the pandemic, by default, has upturned some of our notions and the ways we have looked at society. I think everything has a brighter side, as Dr. Peeler was saying. I mean, even challenges can be, weaknesses can be strengths, threats can be opportunities. In the same way, the pandemic is a trainer of our human mind. It has made us more contemplative, more calm, and more soul searcher, more searcher. And I think by virtue of this A lot of our old values, which were already there, were lost and embedded, are slowly coming back on surface. I think I'll end there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We agree with you. Empathy is very important. Agree with you. So the next question is for Professor Khincha. This is from Dr. Sachin Dutt. So he's asking, what will be the role of human values when machines teach?
Role of human values when machines teach. I don't know the answer, tell you very frankly. I don't know the answer at that time. But one thing, as was told by my previous speakers, that there are some things which don't change at all, And human values are something which will not change. They'll continue to remain. Whether it is Manu Shastra is there from thousands of years and they'll continue to remain. The point is how these human values are transferred on to the next generation is the question that will be important. And how that will happen will be very difficult to guess at this point of time. The other thing that comes to my mind immediately is technology and ethics. Whatever you call ethics or values, I think there will be a connection between the two also, technology and ethics and values. And the value systems in the technology world can be a little bit different interpreted than the basic values. Basic values will remain same, but the other values probably will have different interpretation in the technological age. Thank you.
So the next question is for Dr. Sinha. Sir, the question is, what is the relevance of Vedic knowledge in the current scenario of jobs and careers?
Oh, I think it's very relevant. In fact, somewhere we have forgotten that the knowledge that comes from our ancient wisdom is actually foundational and it never went away. Somewhere we neglected it in our obsession with making higher education about jobs and professions. Higher educational institutions were not meant to be that. If you wanted to be trained for a job, then you went and took up a job and got trained as an apprentice there and you took up that job. We have completely subverted the meaning of higher education. We should go back to those teachings. And that's what I'm actually trying to do with Harappa. You know, whatever I teach at Harappa is not new. I have not invented it. It was invented centuries ago. I'm teaching people how to think. I'm teaching people how to discover their purpose. I'm trying to teach people to be self-aware. I'm trying to teach people to continuously improve, to grow themselves, to evolve. That's what our ancient philosophies all say, that, you know, perfection is about you becoming better every day, and so on. So I think that this is relevant, and not to be cute about it, but the reason it is relevant is that the knowledge that you need for your job and for your profession, you will never be able to keep up with. In today's day and age, you have to unlearn and relearn every few years. And that is the big thing people are saying about the future of roles, future of jobs, future of the workplace, that technology is changing so fast. What is required of you in terms of knowledge is changing so fast that very quickly whatever you learned is going to get outdated. But what stays with you and what allows you to constantly deal with these changes and disruptions, whether it is a pandemic that you're dealing with or a change in the industry or job that you're dealing with, or AI or data science completely removing your job, the only steady and foundational and not changing part is the Vedic teaching or the Vedic philosophies or the ancient philosophies of how you think, how you solve for issues, how do you communicate with people, how do you relate and collaborate with people, and how do you grow better as a person. That are going to be the foundational skills that we need in this area. So anyway, that's my take on that.
Rightly said, sir. Vedic knowledge has always been there. Maybe we have been neglected it. And the next question is for Dr. Sen. So this one is universities use Bloom's taxonomy, which helps teacher define course objectives that are measurable. How can ancient Indian system help in defining measurable learning outcomes free from teacher bias?
Use in the beginning of the question, I missed that word. Use
Bloom's
course.
taxonomy.
Oh, taxonomy. Okay.
Yeah.
So the last part of the question is, how come teachers
How can ancient Indian system help
Okay.
in doing this to overcome teacher bias?
Okay. I mean, I think, I mean, it has been answered to a large extent by Dr. Sena and others, and also by Professor Kinsha, is that what happens in the current situation, in the current ambit of education, there's been a huge advent in technology, the last 150 years. And that has made wonders and marvels. We can't deny that. See, in Indian knowledge system, we are just not doing a nostalgia of the past. We also have to match things with progress and advent in technology. But that's the one side. But what it has harmed, it has made us very myopic. It has made us locked inside computer rooms and labs in front of our machines, so that everything is just data analytics and big data analytics and big data crunching, and you can control the world by pulling in all the Google data or the Microsoft data. That gives us a huge technological advent. But on the other hand, we have a huge bias. We forget the social connections. We forget the social networkings. We forget what is called cooperation and welfare and ethics. The new thing in economics right now. After Kenneth Arrow and all the Nobel laureates, Jose Stiglitz, Amartya Sen, Avijit Bandyopadhyay, they're all working on welfare, ethics, and values. So this is all post Kenneth Arrow. So this is for the West. It is an invention. It's a very new thing which is happening to MIT and other schools of economics. But for the East, we always had a Buddha or a Mahavira or a Shankaracharya or a Vashishta or a Agastya for hundreds and thousands of years, who had talked about ethics. So once you have ethics, it is always collective. And once it's collective, it's empathy. I'm coming back to the word. And once it's empathy, you're with network and interconnections. So the moment you're more and more, you become an universal personality, and you destroy, in the words of Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo, you destroy your little prison in an individual personality. So you automatically transcend the bias. So the problem with a tech-ended education is that it's very advanced, it's very sophisticated, but it does not teach the average human being how to interact. It just teaches how to deal with machines and machine learning and deep learning, but it sort of it does not give us that lead which was there in our ancient education system, to be in synchronization with nature, with sunlight, with greenery, with the forests, with the orchards, with the river, with the changes in the season. From Kalidas to Ravindranath, they wrote the Meghdootam, and the entire Meghdootam is based on natural cycles, which is the modern life cycle analysis of environmental technology. So, and that made us very collective. We used to see things in interconnections. So this is where we can transcend the bias, and this is where the contribution is very paramount. Thank you.
Can I add one sentence to this, with your permission?
Yes, sir. Please.
With your permission, I just I talked about the humans losing their economic value, and then one of the things that comes to mind is this loss is happening because we are creating intelligence without consciousness.
Right.
I think the technology is creating that intelligence without consciousness, and the human value was technology and the intelligence with consciousness. And how do we deal this in the future will be very interesting. And I think the machine technology, I have all the intelligence. Machines don't tire, they do all the intelligence that will come, and as and when we plug. But where is the consciousness gone? I think we need intelligence with consciousness in the future.
Yeah, I'd just like to add there, if I have like 30 seconds. Now, if you look at the modern movies today, like Avatar by James Cameron, or and some other movies. I mean, what do you see in those movies? You see the sheer failure of our machine technology and the machine-driven civilizations. Those people go to a different planet and they think they're backward. That race in that planet, and they call it Pandora. That's what it's a great movie. It shows and it talks about deep networking, natural ecosystems. One of our speakers talked about that. Our entire Indian knowledge system is all about ecosystems, eco connections, permaculture, biocentrism, connections between one systems and other systems. So I think they are very modern and ancient at the same time. Very modern and ancient at the same time. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Is it
So
okay
this
if
one
I
is
ask a question based on this?
pardon?
Is it all right? Is it okay if I
Yes.
ask a question? Okay.
Sure.
I've written it down. It's a little bit wordy, but I'm not sure how to simplify it. I wanted to ask you all how you think we will be able to all work together to change how we are on the world, to stop harming the planet on the long term. How we can construct a common new myth based on wisdom and consciousness and respect for humanity to substitute that which has driven the problem of which we are facing consequences of now, across all our different agendas and perspectives. I know it's a big question, but I'm curious because ethics is artificial thing, no? It's created by humans. It's not ethics. Nature is not ethical. So how do we change our perspectives, taking into account that there are things that never change about humans? How do we change what needs to be changed so that we can survive this extinction on the planet?
Dr. Sen?
Okay. I take it. Dr. Sena? Did you mean me? Yeah,
You go, Dr. Sen, please go first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I think go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thank you. I think this is a very important question on planetary consciousness. Planetary consciousness, and these are themes which are already coming up in the overall global ambit. If you look at systems of what you call deep ecology. I mean, I'm mentioning it again. Deep ecology in the West. They don't call it spirituality, but they call it deep ecology. Most of the things that we do in the name of science is all about shallow ecology. The second thing is, I'd already said, is permaculture. There's a new hypothesis which is called the Gaia's hypothesis. It comes from the ancient Greek world. Gaia is a mother goddess, and she holds the whole cosmos within her womb. And so in all these things which are from the West, they echo our ancient Indian wisdom of a wonderful connect between the microcosm, which is the human configuration, and the macrocosm, which is the whole cosmos. In fact, our entire Indian system of spirituality, yoga, ethics, ecosystem, ecology, whatever you call it, is based on the reciprocity of one foundational principle, which is the complementarity of the microcosm and the macrocosm, between the Pind and the Brahmand, And it was there in Greece at a very ancient point of time, but then it was lost. In India, it is where, that means the nature without, outside you, is also the nature within. So if you're able to control the nature within, either by yoga or by ethics or something, then you become a changed or an improved personality. And your response to the stimuli which comes from outside improves. So you move from a weak anthropic principle to a very strong anthropic principle. You become, as a human unit, as an anthropic principle, you become very strong. This was a dialogue. I think if everybody has read it, it's fine. This was a dialogue 1930 between Albert Einstein and Rabindranath Tagore in Berlin, in his own home of Einstein. They talked for about 3 hours, and it was all noted down in a wonderful book by some people present there. And Tagore and Einstein discussed this for about 3 hours. So Einstein talked about two different realities, one independent of human consciousness and the other dependent on human consciousness. Tagore said there's only one reality, which is dependent on human consciousness, because if we are not there, who is there to talk about the universe? The universe is just a dead physical identity. It doesn't have any existence. So what was discussed in 1930 has become very important today in quantum physics, in relativistic mechanics, from the times of Ilya Prigogine and Richard Feynman and others. I think quantum physics, quantum ecosystems, and quantum algorithms are contributing a lot to the understanding of Indian systems of planetary consciousness. That's what, if I have understood Amaya, this is what it's happening. So if you read some books by the Turning Point by Capra, Fritjof Capra, who has also written the other book, The Tao of Physics, The Turning Point. Yeah, so I think these are books. If you read books by Gregory Bateson, The Deep Ecology, if you read books by Ernst Nace on deep ecology, if you read books by Ken Wilber and Michael Murphy, I mean, you'll see they're probably just saying the same things which was talked about on planetary consciousness by our Indian rishis thousands of years back. It's not a question of what is Indian and what is global. These are fundamental truths which remain, and they belong to an Indian. They also belong to Amaya. They belong to a Russian. They belong to an African. They can belong to people coming from other planets. These are foundational truths. In India, we had the maximum practice of these truths because of yoga, which is a very special system which was developed by the Indian rishis. So that's why in India we have a primacy of these kind of pursuits, which was neglected in other parts of the world. That is the advantage of the Indic civilization, and that's why the civilization has remained sustained, because it had a spiritual level. The cultural level was not the highest rung of Indian civilization. The spiritual level was the highest rung of Indian civilization. Other civilization has come and gone, Egypt and Greece and others, because it didn't have a spiritual level. So this is the contribution of India, not as a country or a geographical space, but as an ethos to planetary consciousness. Thank you.
Dr. Sinha, would you like to add?
Yeah, sure. No, I don't like to. Oh, Dr. Sinha, please. Yeah. I'm having that confusion between Sen and Sinha. We almost come from that same, semantics.
Yeah, actually, you can just call me Pramath. But no, I don't want to add. I think if Amaya's question was also about the how of it, especially from an education perspective, then my belief is that sooner rather than later, and as early as possible in a student or a learner's journey, we have to get them to move beyond the academic classroom into confronting some of the big challenges that we face in the world. I fundamentally believe in the idea that all of us have that natural urge to solve problems, to advance societies, to sustain the universe and our world. The same idea of the microcosm inside us. And I think we just need to light the fire for people. I think at least in India, our students from a very young age are too cloistered. In my higher education institutions that I'm associated with, I try to bring them back, but there's a lot of unlearning that has to happen, and it's a lot of effort. If we could start them young, if we could get them to engage with the environment and with the society and the challenges, and some schools do that. The more evolved schools are doing that, and you can see that the kids who come out of those programs are very, very committed to making the world a better place. And that's the only way to do it. You can't teach this stuff. You can only expose people and expect that they naturally want to do better by the world. Like I said, the sooner we start doing that, whenever the first chance we have to intervene, the better we will be as a world, as another society.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Now, this question is for Dr. Pilar and Amaya. What do you think is the factor in the education system between the East and West that will bring difference? Amaya, you go first.
Okay, I was going to ask Pilar to go first.
You are on mute, Dr. Pilar.
Sorry, let me see if I understood the question correctly. the question was, which is the difference between Eastern and Western culture? What can you say it again?
What do you think is the factor in the education system between the East and West that will bring difference?
Mm, I don't understand what it means with will bring difference. What does it mean will bring difference? I mean, in the education system, there are things that are different between East and West, many differences, even in the system. I mean, the system of education has some similarities because of the British legacy. So there are certain things that are kept similar. But I don't understand if maybe the person who made the question, what does it mean will bring difference? Why the future sentence?
Amaya, your take.
I'm curious as to what that meaning is referred to as well. To bring difference, or to bring difference to how we change, or
Maybe,
that proposes a difference.
maybe.
I've only known the Western educational system, so I can't talk about the differences. But I can only say from my interpretation of the question that it just comes down to Western perspective is a lot more surgical and objective, scientific, and it's the ecological perspective is not as integrated. So I think the best of both worlds is what could move us towards the change that we need, and would be the positive side of globalization and that merging, because there's a lot of value from local existence, local ways that hopefully will not be lost. But I think that if we can somehow conserve what makes each place unique, and at the same time take the best of each world and those things that don't change, that can bring us further as a species, as one more living being on this planet. I know it's again hokey, but that's my interpretation of the question. That's what I think. That's all I can speak for.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you. Professor Khimcha?
Yes.
Would you like to add, Dr. Sen?
No, I fully agree with Amaya, what Amaya said, Anna. I mean, I am a planning student. I believe in what Dr. Friedman, John Friedman of MIT, had said. In this world, we need a normative positive model, a connection between the more structured, analytical approach of the West and the more normative, emotive ecosystems approach of the East. I read that about 40 years back when I was a student of planning. So I think I agree with Amaya. What she has said. Thank you.
Can I add just one?
I have to run, so you have to excuse me. Sorry, Dr. Kinch. I'm going to have to run.
Please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Just wanted to add, I think, I don't know what that just comes to my mind immediately is, one is training the brain and the other is training the mind. That is the difference, Eastern and Western. Western and Eastern, training the brain and training the mind. And what is the difference between brain and mind, and how do we interpret these with the philosophies of the two worlds, is an interesting topic to talk to.
The last question, Professor Kincha, this is for you. If we codify or simulate Vedic knowledge and Vedic system, would this place be a better place to live in? This is coming from Dr. Himanshu from Sushanti University.
What does he mean by codify?
Code as in simulate.
Huh?
code or
If you-
simulate? That is the question.
If I systematize it and I get the answer, I think this is codified. The knowledge is codified today also in different ways. It is in different ways. But this is a personal answer. This is not an answer which will... But my personal answer is no. The world will not be a better place, even if you codify the knowledge. Will not be a better place to live. I have reasons for saying that. The world will not be, because the conflicts of the world are beyond this codification of the knowledge. And therefore, the world will continue, even if I codify the knowledge, the world will continue to have these difficulties in the places where we live. And how do we handle these issues? I think that is what, again, the codifying the knowledge again is brain for me, but not mind for me. I think I come back to the word empathy and this type of things that Professor Dyson used again and again. These are the characteristics of the mind. And how do I get this is the question. The characteristics of the mind. How do I get it? I can't codify them still. Even with all the research that is going on in trying to analyze the brain as a computer and see what and how it is doing, and then try to reflect all these the mind issues into the brain system. I don't think we are still 100 years away from trying to get at a convergence on this type of things.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you, for such a thought-provoking session. And I would conclude by saying, Ekam Sadvipra Bahuda Vadanti. Our system is not just intellectual, but Gnostic as well as emotive. I'm sure we all are learning something from the session today, and a lot of thoughts we've provoked today. Thank you so much, all of you, for your time. Thank you so much. And also the audience. I would like to thank everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.